likely that something had gone by. And when he first described the width of the gash and the height of the gash, 6 stories high, 200 feet wide, which you can't appreciate on television, quite frankly, as much as you think you can. And we've had several reports in from Arthur Raditz at the State Department, which I think most of them we've had on the air so far, which was the State Department ordered U.S. embassies around the world to close for the day, but it's up to the individual embassy, given the situation that they think is appropriate in their region. Many have closed for the day. Secretary of State Powell, who's been in Colombia, is on his way home tonight, but we do not know actually where he is at the moment. I told you just a moment ago that Ann Compton, who's been with President Bush all day, believes that he is on the move, or they are on the move again, and one can only believe, I shouldn't say that, didn't think they were going to go to Nebraska. We can only imagine that there's this pressure to get the president back to the nation's capital. And the State Department was evacuated at the time. There's actually been a worldwide caution about terrorist activity out and about universally since the 7th of September. But it had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with what happened in New York City and in Washington today, and what potentially happened, we're told, at Camp David, based on the information from one passenger who called 911 from the United Airlines that crashed near Johnstown, which said that they were headed in the direction of Camp David. The New York Stock Exchange and the American Stock Exchange have both announced that they will not trade tomorrow, and they will make a decision tomorrow on when trading will resume. The country has, in many ways, come to a halt. Not completely by any means, because every politician has spoken and had a chance to speak today has made the point that if you change too much in the country, you're doing exactly what the terrorists and their allies would like you to do. Linda Douglas on Capitol Hill. Linda.
Peter, we've been trying to confirm all day and have confirmed that indeed a very small group of congressional leaders has been taken to a single secure location. Absolutely no disclosure yet of where that location is. They've been meeting together and also have been briefed by Vice President Cheney and are trying to make the decision about whether to go back into session tonight. There is a strong sentiment among many members of Congress that it would send a very strong message to the rest of the world if the Congress were to go back into session tonight. Many of the members I've spoken to throughout the day say this is a system in which your constituents are supposed to be able to come to the nation's capital and walk right up to their elected representative and have a conversation. That's the message they want to send, although if they went into session tonight, it would probably be to say a prayer and simply leave. The small group of leaders that is in this undisclosed location is going to be conferring with the president, may have already, and there is very tight security now, Peter, about their whereabouts.
And President Bush is on his way back to Washington at the moment. They're about to take off from this Air Force base in Nebraska. But Linda, given just what we heard Senator Biden say earlier today, you know there's this expression on Capitol Hill to show the world that the country is up and running. Do you think this is pretty likely before the day is over? I wonder why the Senate leadership is still out of sight, if not out of mind.
Well, this is on strong advice from the security forces in the city of Washington, the Capitol Police, the Secret Service, the military. They've been talking to the CIA. The two Senate leaders, as I mentioned to you earlier in the day, Senator Daschle, the majority leader, Senator Lott, the Republican leaders were immediately taken out of the Capitol and taken to an undisclosed location. Then later on, other leaders were rounded up. Helicopters came and landed on the Capitol grounds to pick up a few of them and took them out. They didn't have much choice about this. This is advice they're getting. One more thing, by the way, about security, Peter. There's going to be a briefing for all members of Congress who want to attend, an intelligence briefing at about 5 o'clock. Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton has just shown up to the location where that briefing was going to take place, with her Secret Service very much in evidence.
Thanks very much, Linda Douglas. So we're going to look for a manifestation sometime tonight of congressional will, congressional will to show the world that the United States is up and running, but we have no confirmation of that. And I must confess, Linda, Douglas, you still there?
Yes, I am.
I didn't realize at first, because nobody ever said it that specifically, that the leader of the Republican Democratic parties in the Senate had been taken out of the city to a secret location. They had just been moved down the street.
Yes, that's right. We have been told that they were taken out of the city. Helicopters came and picked them up on the ground, some of them. We don't know which ones got into the helicopters because it was just too far away for us to see, and took them out of Washington. but
Okay.
it could be to someplace very close.
Thanks very much, Linda Douglas. Going to go to Lynn Sher and talk about the aircraft involved today in just a minute. Before we do, just want to give you some other examples of how this has affected the country as a whole. The Emmys, which were going to be held in Los Angeles, the Latin Grammys, which were scheduled, their award ceremonies for tomorrow night, I think the Latin Grammys, have now canceled or postponed their particular celebrations. We told you earlier about some of the other examples, but aside from looking at that list on the screen itself, think of this. Aside from the work stoppages, this is the first time since D-Day in 1944 that organized baseball has wiped out a whole day of regular season play. First time since D-Day in 1944, the landing of the Allied forces on the beaches at Normandy, which led ultimately to the liberation of Europe from the Germans. It's the first time since 1944 that organized baseball has done that. And there were all of the television shows in New York City, which David Letterman's show, and others on CBS, which all get television audiences, popular audiences coming from around the country. They've all canceled their tapings. They'll be either in reruns tonight. This is true of the late night show on NBC. Malls across the country, some of you who live out around about the country, you all know this better than we do, but malls around the country simply locked their doors, and people couldn't go and shop in the malls today. It was this feeling that anywhere there were people gathered, that there was a measure of vulnerability which we had seen in New York City. Now, the mayor of New York City, Rudolph Giuliani, says at the moment that at least 2,100 people have been injured and 600 of them taken to hospitals, and that there are 1,500 walking wounded who have been taken to Liberty State Park, which is on the other side of the New York harbor there, where the Hudson River meets the harbor. It may be live, but I'm not quite sure what you're looking at. Is this from the New Jersey side? This is from Liberty State Park, looking, I assume, across the New York harbor at an earlier point today, because the smoke is not as thick now as it was. That's live. That's a live photograph, and that dark smoke is still coming from the trade tower itself. Thank you. As for the attack on the Pentagon, the Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington, Virginia, reports there have been as many 31 people injured there and admitted to the hospital, including 2 who are in surgery. And most other patients are in intensive care or being treated for smoke immolation. I'm joined by Tom Humphreys, but I don't know much more about you, Mr. Humphreys, than that. You were in the World Trade Center on the 57th floor.
Yes.
And you walked out.
Yes.
So take us from the beginning, would you?
Well, I was sitting at my desk working on a speech I was supposed to give this afternoon, and the building was rocked by an explosion. And
which tower were you in?
I was in Tower 1.
Right.
And the next thing I knew, I saw flaming debris cascading down the side of the building. And I was in the '93 bombing,
right,
and I knew this one was a lot worse. So we went out on the floor and basically... You
worked for a business in the building?
I worked for a law firm in the building.
Right.
And basically went on the floor, tried to figure out what was going on, figure out whether we should evacuate or not. About 5 minutes into that, we decided that it was best to get out.
You were in the south. You were in the south tower.
We were in the north tower.
Sorry, in the north tower.
North tower,
right,
which is One World Trade.
Right.
Decided that it was time to get out. Our office manager heard that the plane had been, that the building had been hit by an aircraft at the 90th floor. So we assumed that the problem was above us, and that we could evacuate, and that's what folks did.
Did you think at the moment that it was a terrorist attack? Did you think it was an accident? Did you have the vaguest idea?
I had some idea there was a bombing. Having been in the '93 incident, that kind of explosion just doesn't happen normally. I didn't know what it was, but when I heard there was a plane that hit, I thought that made some sense, and I thought that it was very unlikely that any kind of plane would hit the Trade Center accidentally, you know, on a clear day. So
was there how immediate, how deep was the concern in your colleagues and out on the common halls? Was there panic at all?
No, that's the one thing. What I found is no panic. People are concerned. People are a little apprehensive, and they want to know what to do. But both on the floor and then down the stairwell, there's no panic. And in fact, people were helping other people to an incredible degree.
Were the stairwells lighted?
Yes, this time they were. Last time they weren't. This time the stairwells were lighted. There was some smoke, but that was it wasn't nearly as bad.
Was there emergency lighting?
Yeah, there was. There was no other, there were no fire or police personnel. At that point, you're on your own.
Now, you came down from the 57th floor. Were other people coming down from the floors above you and below you?
They were coming down from the floors above. There were some injured people that came down apparently from floors where this had happened. And so we saw them as well.
And how long did it take you to get out of the building?
I estimate it took me 45 minutes or more to get out of the building.
And in the time that you were coming down, there was another aircraft hit the southern
Yeah,
tower.
I was on the 44th floor trying to get down, and we heard another, explosion. We didn't know what it was. We again saw flaming debris, and I now know that that was the second aircraft that hit.
I think you maybe know where I'm going. You were on the 90th floor. It took you 45 minutes.
57th
floor. There were people coming down from floors above you.
Right.
Is it your sense that in at least your tower, before the tower collapsed, everybody or a large number of percentage of people managed to be evacuated?
I think a lot of people got out. First of all, it was 8:45 in the morning, so that's relatively early by New York standards.
Right.
And then secondly, the first plane that hit, there was time to get out. I think even having said that, there were a lot of people still in that building, including the fire and police personnel that were trying to come up. So, but my sense is that I know on our floor a lot of people got out.
And as you came down, were you joined by people in other floors? Is it a common evacuation passage down through the building?
Well, the problem was there was only one stairwell open. The other stairwells were blocked by smoke. And so you had one narrow stairwell, which is what led to the delay in the evacuation. And that's why it took so long to get out.
We've told people in the rest of the country fairly regularly, the 50,000 people who work in the two trade centers, and you say 8:45 in the morning is a little late for New York City.
It's a little early.
Sorry, a little early.
Yeah.
Do you have a feeling that a lot of people hadn't gone into the building at this point today?
I know in our offices, we're a law firm. We start at 9:30, and a lot of people were not there yet. Some of the businesses which operate on an earlier schedule, I'm sure everybody was there.
Right.
But I think that the building wasn't as full as it could have been. If it had been 2 hours later, it would have been much worse.
And did you notice today as you went to work or as you came out that it was more sparsely populated?
It was about the same. I mean, it was about a normal day.
I must confess I'm amazed at how calm you are, having been through not only the 1993 bombing, but this, and walked down by yourself, and you seem perfectly calm.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
Right.
So,
and how did people behave as you were evacuating?
People, I mean, that was, I saw it again 8 years ago, and I saw it today. People were incredibly calm, and they were helping other people. I fear that some of the people that were helping other people didn't make it out of that building because, they stayed behind, and fire personnel. But people, there was no panic that I saw. And in that environment, you have a narrow stairwell, a lot of people, you don't know what's going on. It's a recipe for disaster, and the people are very, very calm.
Could you tell at all, from your perspective on the 57th floor, that when the aircraft hits, which we think is about the 90th floor, or at least in the very top part of the building, how many floors were actually damaged at the time, or did people talk at all about the degree of damage that had been done just by the plane hitting before the building collapsed?
It was a little hard to tell. You had some people coming down from the higher floors.
But people were able to get from the higher floors down through the damaged part of the building?
Well, that I don't know.
Okay.
My sense is that they came down from floors under 90 and were able to get down above 90. I don't know.
Okay.
I know that in Tower 2, I talked to someone from Tower 2, and they were able to get down from around the 88th floor. They were evacuating. When our tower was hit, they were evacuating, and then their tower was hit. And even so, they were able to get down because they were on the right side of the building.
Right.
So,
and were you there when first Tower 2 and then Tower 1 collapsed?
Well, I just had exited the building, and I was out on Church Street, and the way I saw it, Tower 2 came down. The South Tower came down first, and I did see that, yeah. And
then I assume you ran.
I ran like hell.
Yeah, we've seen the video of people just running like hell in every direction to get as far away as possible.
And I think the tragedy is that the police and fire personnel that were trying to help people out of that building were right at ground zero when that happened. So you have to give them a lot of credit.
As somebody said, we've said several times today, when the folks is running one way, the police and the fire department are running the other way, trying to help. Anything else aside from your survival which strikes you at this several hours after you went through this horrible experience?
Well, I mean, you know, I think everybody in this country believes we've got to find the people that did it, and we've got to deal with them. And, you know, I felt this way in 1993, and I think there is no stronger emotion. And, you know, I'm sorry, but this cannot happen in this country.
Many thanks, Tom. Really appreciate you helping us to understand. That's Tom Humphreys, who works in a law firm in the Trade Tower. He was in the North Tower on the 57th floor, and he walked out, and you've heard his story. And ABC's Charlie Gibson has been trying to get a handle on some of the other stories which are similar. Charlie?
Well, Peter, we've been trying to keep track of the injury situation as it exists. Obviously, the numbers of those who have died today, it's going to be some time before we have any estimates, and properly people in New York and in Washington around the Pentagon are not commenting. They shouldn't, because we don't have any concept. But as you reported a few moments ago, Mayor Giuliani did talk about the numbers of injured, saying at least, and these are very rough numbers, at least 2,100 people injured, 600 taken to hospitals, 1,500 walking wounded, he said, many of whom have been evacuated to New Jersey's Liberty State Park, right across the river, the Hudson River, from where the World Trade Centers were. And we have some further reports. ABC's Cynthia McFadden, who has been down in that area all day long, says that a triage center has been set up on the Chelsea Piers in New York City. Now, the Chelsea Piers is not a hospital area at all. It's an area that used to be shipping piers along the Hudson River in Lower Manhattan, and is now used for recreational purposes. There are tennis courts and golf driving ranges and other things there, meeting rooms, that kind of thing. It's a commercial operation, but a triage center has been set up there, and 50 makeshift operating rooms are being prepped, and hundreds of ambulances are there waiting to take injured away from that facility. But they are doing treatment of people right on the site or nearby at Chelsea Piers. Reports from some of the hospitals that are taking the injured. St. Vincent's Hospital here in New York, the numbers again very rough, but an estimate of over 200 that have been taken in there, 3 dead, 18 in critical condition, and the most chilling quote that you can hear, Dr. Stephen Stern there at St. Vincent's Hospital quoted as saying, hundreds of people coming in have been burned from head to toe. Bellevue Hospital reporting more than 100 patients brought in, 2 dead. Beth Israel reporting earlier that 70 patients had been brought in. There are some estimates from hospitals in Virginia near the Pentagon of dozens of people having been brought in there. And I guess the heartening note in all this, hospitals around New York that are not in the immediate vicinity of the World Trade Centers, people saying hundreds of donors are reportedly lined up to give blood outside Beth Israel Medical Center and some others here in New York City. And what I guess is a precursor of what is going to be the kinds of terrible news that we're going to get over the next few days, a spokesman at the medical examiner's office in New York City, the coroner's office, says that for now all of the bodies that are being brought in, dead bodies, will go to the medical examiner's office on First Avenue here in New York. They say they have room for several hundred bodies, and they are making room for more space since they anticipate more bodies will be brought in. One other note to mention, at 4:30 this afternoon Eastern Time, the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, says that it has activated all 10 of FEMA's regional headquarters around the country, including those on the East Coast and then all the way west as far as San Francisco and the state of Washington. They have activated all of those regional headquarters, activated the Federal Response Plan, which FEMA says brings together 28 federal agencies and the American Red Cross, and 12 urban search and rescue teams are being dispatched. 8 of them are being sent here to New York and 4 to Washington, all deployed to search for victims of what has happened today. And the Health and Human Services Department has activated a national medical emergency system. It's really an unprecedented move, but it could dispatch nearly 7,000 volunteer doctors, nurses, pharmacists, other medical staff to areas that have been affected by today's attacks. So that brings you up somewhat to date on what's being done in terms of those who have been injured and provisions now being made for those who've been killed today. Peter?
Thank you, Charlie, very much. Just to try to keep the sort of sense or the proportion of casualties into some kind of in some kind of perspective. The gentleman with whom we've just been talking, who worked in a law firm in the Northern Tower, said that after the first aircraft hit in that tower, which is 8:48 Eastern Time. This is one of those "where were you when" moments I'm just utterly convinced will be that way in historical terms. Where were you when the first aircraft and then the second aircraft crashed or were crashed into the Twin Trade Towers in New York City on this day, the 11th of the month. And there's a timeline. If it's 8 hours now since this happened, and where Mayor Giuliani speaks just a few minutes ago, they know of 2,100 people injured, and you see the pictures that the young man brought us from the absolute bottom, ground zero location, where the tower not only crashed on itself, but then crashed down into the ground. There wasn't a sound there except the sound of flames licking up from underground, and there was no sign of any person. And we know, because we've said it many times, that the fire department and the police department were going inwards, not outwards, when all of this happened. It's just absolutely impossible to get a grasp at. I'm very interested in the gentleman we spoke to a little while ago from the law firm, Tom, I've probably forgotten his last name. Say it out loud. Thank you, Tom Humphreys. Tom Humphreys, who said that it was his impression, at least in his building, in the North Tower, that a lot of people got out of that or had not arrived at work because it was, as he said, by New York standards, just a little earlier than people were accustomed. But when this young man, Mr. Saviz, brought us his video that he'd taken, just got on his motorbike up and then walked in to this scene on the ground, it is to realize that everybody's being kept, as Bill Lakemore subsequently confirmed for us, being kept at a distance from this at the side, and that's what's left on the left of the facade of the North Tower. ABC's Bob Jamieson is downtown now, and Bob, we're looking at the pictures that have been brought to us by this young producer of a magazine. Can you just talk in general terms as you like?
Well, generally speaking, Peter, as the smoke blows back and forth and for a moment or two doesn't obscure both of the two World Trade Center buildings, you see so little. It's a tremendously eerie feeling to be in Lower Manhattan, looking down toward the tip of the island and seeing very few people, no traffic, the smoke continuing to billow from these buildings, and nothing where there were once these two landmarks that drew everyone's attention, whether you drove or flew or came to New York by boat. But Peter, there is a new concern, according to authorities at this moment here in Lower Manhattan, and that is the growing fear that another building in the World Trade Center complex, which was not struck by an airplane, is in danger of collapsing. That is number 7 World Trade Center, somewhat shorter, with somewhat fewer stories than numbers 1 and 2. There is a fire burning vigorously in the lower floors of that building, threatening the foundation. And the building was already damaged some 6 hours ago now when the North Tower collapsed, and part of that process of the building collapsing struck and damaged number 7 World Trade Center. So it was already at some risk before this fire grew as vigorously as it has. The authorities have now moved people several blocks away from that building, and we're just watching and waiting to see what happens.
Bob, is number 7 World Trade Center, and I see you've now managed to come down to the ground, which suggests things loosen up a little bit. Is that where the mayor's emergency headquarters are?
Peter, I honestly don't know, but I will tell you that number 7 is just behind number 2. I'm in Tribeca now, and you're seeing mostly smoke from the remnants of number 1 and number 2, but there somewhere in that smoke is number 7.
I don't know how big number 7, the World Trade Center, is it? But my recollection is a fairly low building, isn't it? Or is...
Yes, I would guess, and I'm sorry to have to make a guess, that it is only about half as tall as number 2.
Okay.
That seems to me what it appeared to be.
We'll find out soon enough. I appreciate it, Bob. Thanks very much. Bob Jameson, who, as this day unveils, manages to get closer and closer. In a minute, we're going to talk to a freelance photographer who got really close today, but he's making a phone call at the moment. Take your time, Evan, and we'll come back to you. I can see where you've been just by the state of your equipment at this moment. But as it has been about 8 hours now, let us try to bring you up to date with the horrendous sights and sounds of this attack on the United States and its citizens today. Here's ABC's John Donvan.
We want to tell you what we know as we know it. We just got a report in that there's been some sort of explosion at
the first thing any television camera saw this morning was this. Just before 9 o'clock, roughly 15 minutes earlier, an American Airlines jet hijacked from Boston had crashed into the South Tower of the World Trade Center. There were 92 people on board.
It does not appear that there's any kind of an effort up there yet. Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did not see a plane go in.
Minutes later, the second plane, the second tower. The fireball ate up the aircraft. It was a United Airlines flight, a 767 from Boston to Los Angeles. There had been 65 people on board.
Some sort of a concerted.
I was happening to look on the first tower, and I actually saw people waving where the first plane crashed through, and then it was unbelievable seeing this second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
New York City was staggered.
As soon as he got hit, I was thrown to a window. So I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs, burnt up. It's bad.
And still it wasn't over. This was the southern tower falling in on itself. It was now roughly an hour since the first attack. Meanwhile, it was beginning here in Washington. Another hijacked plane hits the Pentagon.
U.S. officials are saying there was no warning, no indicators of any kind of a likely terrorist attack. Number 2, they say Pentagon officials within the intelligence and the counterterrorism offices are now looking at this very intensely.
ABC reporters across the city are beginning to hear the word terrorism.
It seems obvious unofficially to people here that it was a terrorist attack, but they obviously can't reach any firm conclusions at this point. So the Pentagon is engaged, and I'm sure law enforcement is, but they say they had no warnings.
Report piles on report.
Okay, there's been an explosion of some kind that shook the grounds of the Capitol. We all heard it. Everybody ran for cover. We don't know where it was. We don't see the smoke yet. Everybody's saying, get back. We're running, we're running, we're running, we're running. They're screaming at us to get back.
On television, it looked like it was happening all over. 10:28 a.m., New York City, and in the shadow of the one remaining tower, a snatch of conversation between a reporter and a rescuer.
Why are they pulling us out of here?
Because the tower's leaning.
The north tower is leaning.
Broadway.
Fight, march quick. Oh my God, there it goes!
I looked up as soon as we got across the street. I looked up, I saw the tower start to buckle. I just turned and ran, ducked down, put a jacket over my head. 3 or 4 of us huddled together, and it was just black everywhere.
Washington, the White House is evacuated.
The Office of Personnel Management says all federal office buildings in the Washington area have been evacuated and closed. The employees sent home immediately.
The evacuation order creates instant gridlock in downtown Washington. The president was not in the city. He was in Florida visiting a school.
Today, we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
Officials at this end are not confirming that the president's plane is going to Andrews. We don't know if it's going to Andrews or some other location. All they've said is that he will convene a National Security Council meeting, and we don't know where that will take place either. Obviously, they want to keep a lot of people guessing as to the president's whereabouts.
Plane, a jet.
Now it was lunchtime, and yet more terrible news is coming in. Another United airliner with 45 people on board has crashed south of Pittsburgh, presumably another victim of terrorism.
We talked to a couple of people who actually witnessed the plane going down and said it was quite devastating. Went right down into the woods. They saw all sorts of debris flying out into the woods and into the trees, and it's quite a devastating scene from what we're told.
At this point, it is hard to believe we're still in the same day that began with this picture. National Guard units are out. Washington is shut down. Airports in the U.S. and Canada are closed. And the death toll, still uncountable, is also unimaginable. John Donvan, ABC News, Washington.
Excellent report from John Donvan, pulling together this day, which has so much immediacy, so much history, such magnitude to it, and touches every American. And as I turn around on occasion to look at the computer screen behind me, I find emails coming in from people in other countries, Canada and Europe included, from friends and from families and colleagues, all expressing this deep empathy and sympathy for people here today who had friends and acquaintances, but just seeming at whatever distance to appreciate what is happening, even though they were not close to it. We're now joined by a young man who was very close to it again. This is Evan Fairbanks. He's a freelance photographer. Interestingly enough, you and I were just talking about journalists' emotions at a time like this, and the last thing journalists can afford to do is to fall prey to their emotions at a time like this, because it's too hard in the middle of a story. But you were very close this morning and photographing on assignment for a church when things began to happen. So we're going to show your videotape, if we may, though. Are you principally a still photographer? Or both?
Still and video.
Okay. Can we just look at what your first video is and explain it to us?
I walked out of Trinity Church after we had a blackout in our studio, and one of the studio managers grabbed one of our cameras when we knew what was happening. And I went out and was shooting aftermath.
Good God.
And I suddenly saw a plane flying into my viewfinder and said, gee, it's kind of close for that to be here now, and then realized what happened.
Yeah.
And
we'll run this again, because I think this is, will we run that again, Roger Goodman? That's Roger Goodman, our director, because this is, we've seen footage before of people on the run, and I understand that that's your shadow as you went by a storefront.
Yeah, actually,
right?
it was. It's the first time I've seen that.
And was there absolute panic immediately?
Instantly. It was just pandemonium. Nobody knew what to do. There was no clear thinking. People were just reacting to kind of save themselves and the people around them.
You're in the same location when the building comes down.
I had been taken downstairs by Port Authority police who knew that I had this videotape. And we were moving actually to go back to the Trinity Church to make them a dub of the tape in a format that they could use on a VHS tape. And suddenly I heard one of the guys say, hey, Evan, watch out.
Hang on just a second. If you look in the upper, this now is frozen. This is an angle of this attack that we have not seen before. At the top of the building on your left, out of the left, will come the building. And watch how the aircraft penetrates the building. Go ahead. Completely in one side and out the other.
It just disappeared. It disappeared like a bad special effect. It disappeared right into the building. I've seen it 6, 7 times now. It's still incomprehensible what is actually happening there. You're right. As a journalist, you have to take yourself away from it, and I'm still not there yet. And the more and more I see it, and as time goes by.
The modern technology enables us to see horror just as we are able to see sport in a variety of different speeds, or at a variety of different speeds. And I think you now have a better appreciation than we have had up until now, for which we thank you, Evan, because we see exactly how determined somebody was to do this horrible damage, taking a plane so powerfully and so fast in one side of the building, other. Tell me more what it's been like for you today as working the street.
It's numbing. It's like being in the 4th dimension. It's like we're not even on the, it's not even New York City where it's happening. Nothing is normal. People are just walking in a daze up and down the streets. Nobody knows where to go. I just feel kind of this nervous, anxious buzz, and still unfathomable.
Trinity Church, one of the oldest, I think the oldest Episcopal church, certainly in this part of the world, certainly the oldest in the city, on the edge of Wall Street there. Was it being used? Did people come to it for any subsequent occasion?
It was being, we were only shooting a kind of a teleconference up in the 4th floor TV studio there. And we were all sitting in the studio about an hour before our airtime, and there was the lights went out for a second, they flickered. And we kind of joked with the studio guys that they just put in a new studio and said, hey, you guys better watch out for that. That's not normal. And then within 10 seconds, people came running in and said that the Trade Center had been hit. They tried to call a production meeting and ask people to stay in the building, and people were just kind of fleeing. And I grabbed my still camera and was going to run out, not really heeding what anybody was saying there, knowing what was happening outside and feeling the need to be there. And one of the guys came out of the studio with a camera and was putting a tape in it, and I just grabbed it and ran.
And we saw the shadow of you running across the street. What was you afraid of, principally, as you were running?
I was afraid that I was going to be rained upon by whatever was coming off the building. So I knew that I had a few seconds to get basically an establishing shot, and then I had to look out for myself. And I ran. I was on the southeast corner of the plaza. I'm not sure exactly what building is there. And I just went around the corner a little south on Church and just got underneath a car and pointed the camera up into the sky and stayed there for a while, and then came out after a few minutes when the debris stopped raining so heavily. And I went around the corner and was pulled under an overhang by a couple of Port Authority police, to whom I immediately mentioned what I had shot. And they just grabbed me and whisked me down into the Port Authority police headquarters. And we were leaving there to go back to Trinity Church to make a dub of the tape, when suddenly the Tower 2, the top collapsed. And I just looked up and saw from basically 2 blocks away this reverse mushroom cloud coming down at me.
I know I said earlier this looked like a banana suddenly being peeled. It's extraordinary.
Well, I've seen shots of the collapse from far away, and I just can't believe that I was actually there and walked away. I mean, I had to dive underneath. I ran backwards with the camera just pointed behind me, away from the scene, and saw that, you know, have heard about clouds enveloping people and oxygen being depleted, and I just dove under the biggest emergency response vehicle that I could see. Stayed there for about 30 seconds, saw nothing but pitch black. I started having difficulty breathing. I thought my oxygen was starting to dwindle, and there was a moment when I said, well, this might be it. And my only chance is to get out and start walking north.
Well, we're very grateful to you. Very grateful you're okay, and that you took these photographs and that you shared them with the public. They're very dramatic. I needn't tell you that, but I'm very grateful to you.
Oh, you're welcome.
To see Evan Fairbank. He's a freelance photographer who was working in Trinity Church today on the edge of Wall Street today when he and his colleagues on a production shoot in a church saw these 2 extraordinary scenes from, to put it directly, from a different angle, because we have seen it so many times, but this is the most dramatic angle we have seen this plane flying at the top of that building. It's quite extraordinary. I want to go to Washington very briefly, because we said the president was on his way, we believe, to Washington from Nebraska, and ABC's Claire Shipman is there, and I gather, Claire, the president wants to talk to the nation again.
Indeed, he does. He is on his way back to Washington at this point. We're told he does plan to address the nation tonight, but we don't have a time for that. We're told that he feels very strongly about this. People who've been with him say he's been angry and upset about what happened, and he very much wants to express it. We're also told, Peter, that the congressional leadership is on its way back to Washington, or will be very shortly, from its safe haven, and that those leaders, a combination of the congressional leaders, will also be addressing the nation tonight. There's apparently a real premium here from the leadership in Washington on presenting a face of business as usual. There have been a lot of security concerns presented to everybody about coming back to the nation's capital, but everybody has said, we want to show that the government is up and running, and that's what's most important to us, so try to minimize the risks. So it looks like a lot of people will be back. A couple of little notes about the president's return. We're told it's likely he will land, as he usually does, at Andrews Air Force Base. They think the airspace here is probably the safest in the nation right now. They're not sure they want him to chopper to the White House, though. They don't feel so comfortable about that. He may come by motorcade. When he arrives at the White House, we're told Vice President Dick Cheney will then no longer stay at the White House. He will be taken somewhere else as a precaution, but Mrs. Bush will likely then come back to the White House. Peter?
Thanks very much, Claire Shipman in Washington. And so it is clear that the president is going to talk to the nation again. He is going to come back to Washington. His political staff has wanted to do that all day. The Secret Service has had the upper hand in this regard. But again, there's probably nothing clear. The Secret Service can be accused on occasion of overreacting and having its way, and even bullying on occasion. But it always is particularly true in the wake of the assassination of President Kennedy. Always says to the public and those people who wish to resist it, well, what would you have us do? Do you remember President Kennedy's assassination, the attempt on President Ford? And so, in some respects, it's hard to fault them for moving the president around the country today, even if you were inclined to do so, because the degree of uncertainty that has existed in much of the country as well as overseas today has been very, very intense. One of the first things we really noticed about today, as opposed, maybe we do learn our lessons on some occasions, that after the Oklahoma City bombing, when everybody thought it was a Muslim organization, it was bound to be Middle East terrorism, and of course it turns out to be Timothy McVeigh and subsequently Terry Nichols, his accomplice in this. By the way, they put a protective cordon of security around his prison today, Terry Nichols. He is going to go on trial for murder in Oklahoma State. But in just so many different places there was a reaction, and there was a very quick reaction today from not only a number of Muslim groups in this country but overseas to very quickly condemn the attacks today and encourage other people not to blame Muslims in general for whatever happened today, as we do not yet know who perpetrated it. It's interesting that the Muslim organizations in America, Muslim Americans, feel defensive enough about this. They have to get on and say this in a public way. But what is also interesting is that from overseas, both from the Taliban in Afghanistan itself, said they had no responsibility for it, did not condemn it, and believed that Osama bin Laden, who they have to a large measure given sanctuary in Afghanistan, could not have done it because it was too sophisticated. And they believe that it was indeed governments who were involved in this, or at least they say they do. And the head of Hamas said today from Gaza, Hamas, one of the major Palestinian organizations involved in confronting the Israelis at a lot of levels and having to deal with the consequence of Israeli attacks on Palestinians as well, said in a very public statement today that this was not part of their operations, that they confined their operations to what they described as the Palestinian battlefield, in other words, the battle between Israeli and Palestinians at the moment. And Yasser Arafat, the chairman of the president of the Palestinian Authority, the chairman of the PLO, was one of the very first people today to come out and make a public statement condemning terrorism and sympathizing deeply with the American people who had suffered through this. But in every, what video are you going to give me now? Okay, thank you very much. This is the White House, the flag on the flagstaff at the White House. Boy, that'll happen all over the country now, being lowered to half staff. And this is pretty much the same location. You see the Washington Monument very powerfully on a foreshortened lens there in the background, and the flag of the White House being lowered to half staff. That's going to happen everywhere in the country, and we're going to see the yellow ribbons of every imaginable color in country and abroad in the next several days as it begins to sink even more deeply what the country as a whole and individuals in horrifying individual circumstances have suffered. Jim Wooten, who's our senior correspondent in London, put together a small package for us on overseas reaction today, because we've been sensing it here. People overseas feel very close to this right now. Here's his report.
As word moved across the Atlantic to here in Europe and beyond, the first focus was on Afghanistan, where officials of the Taliban government not only condemned the attacks, but insisted for whatever it's worth that Osama bin Laden is forbidden to use the country as a base for terrorism, and is in no position to do so, though he's believed to have planned previous terrorism from there. In the Middle East,
we are completely shocked, completely shocked.
Yasser Arafat offered condolences from the Palestinian people to America, a sympathy not shared by more militant Palestinians in Jerusalem or these Muslims celebrating in Lebanon. Generally, from leaders of Palestinian militant groups, there were denials of responsibility, but condemnations of U.S. policy in the region.
We call upon the American administration to review their attitude and their policy towards the Palestinian question, because this policy arouses the anger and the hatred of our people.
Russian President Vladimir Putin extended his condolences, then at U.S. request canceled major military maneuvers by the Russian Air Force. There was heightened security at American embassies around the world, including Berlin, where German citizens brought flowers to the gates as a memorial to today's victims. And as air traffic into and out of London's Heathrow Airport was delayed, flights to the U.S. were canceled indefinitely, British Prime Minister Tony Blair had this to say.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world today. It is perpetrated by fanatics who are utterly indifferent to the sanctity of human life. And we, the democracies of this world, are going to have to come together to fight it together and eradicate this evil completely from our world.
And of course, as you listen to Tony Blair, thank you very much, Jim Wooten, our senior correspondent overseas in Europe, for that report. But Tony Blair, the British Prime Minister, puts it as aptly as anybody in the world could put it today. We are now confronting, and have for some long period of time, a new and different evil in the world by people who are totally fanatics. I think that was precisely what he said. And who are, and this is the key to all this, of course, are utterly indifferent to the people they are attacking. They are launching an attack on the United States of America, totally indifferent. As one of the people who'd been, as the young man who took photographs for us on the site itself down at the trade tower said earlier today, utterly indifferent to the people who may be in any of these locations, whether they could have been brothers or aunts or relatives even of the people who launched these attacks. That is not unimaginable, because the world is such a mobile place at the moment. And there, in that report from Jim Wooten, you also see, under any number of circumstances in other places, security guards whipping out their guns and going to do what they do for their individual clients, because everywhere in the world today, this is true in the Soviet Union, in the former nations of the Soviet Union, this is true all over we've lived with the Balkans now, everybody lives with the possibility that this is going to happen to the person they work for or are close to or in their community. And now the United States, as it was at the time of Oklahoma City, I'm reminded, I try to draw a parallel for you without getting too long-winded about this, that in Israel and in the Palestinian territories today, this is how people live. They walk around in both Israel and the Palestinian territories, doesn't matter where in Israel, doesn't matter where in the Palestinian territories, totally conscious all the time that this could indeed happen to them at any given moment. ABC's John Miller has been off for a while talking because he knows them better than most of the police and the fire department, and you arrived and said there's no good news.
No, in fact, the news is bad. There's only more difficulty. What we expected to learn was that there were rescue operations going on, and of course our own reporters have told us that it seems that police and fire rescue workers have drawn back. That, I am told, is because 7 World Trade Center, which is a building, part of the World Trade Center complex, it's the building across Vesey Street from the 2 twin towers. Ironically, as you and I spoke with Jerry Howard much earlier, it is the building that headquarters the New York City Emergency Management Office, a bunker that was built to withstand explosion, hurricane, and disaster. 7 World Trade Center is possibly structurally unsound, and they fear that if that building goes, it could cause so many more injuries to rescue workers in the rubble of what was the Twin Towers across the street. So they are continuing to fight the fire, but they've pulled the rescuers back until they can really assess what's going to happen with that building.
And Bob Jameson, who we talked to, who gave us first early warning of this some time ago, wasn't sure exactly how tall that building was. Number 7 World Trade Center is 47 stories tall, and I assume, maybe you know, but listen first of all. Again, you hear the sounds. I apologize. I thought it was something new coming. John, I assume that the 7, the World Trade Center, has been evacuated?
Yes, it's been evacuated, and they're just trying to assess what they can do to it to ensure its structural stability before they send people in to go through the rubble and look for survivors.
And do they believe this was made structurally unsound by the concussion of the Twin Towers falling?
Yes, and literally by the fact that so much of one of the Twin Towers fell on top of the building. In fact, as Jerry Howard told us earlier, people couldn't get in or get out of the entrances because it was buried in the rubble of the Twin Towers, most of the ground floor of it. They've been able to get people out, but they don't know that the building is safe.
Do your police and fire department contacts believe that under the rubble here of the North Tower, which collapsed, which we have seen, which we're looking at this moment, do they believe that there's survivors under there?
They are certainly holding out the possibility and the hope, especially since so many of them are police and fire personnel. There's a real difficulty for them right now because their instinct is to run in and save their people, and perhaps cooler heads in the emergency management have said we can't afford to lose any more people if another building goes. So they're terribly torn between their instincts to rescue the civilians and their own colleagues, and the numbers of unaccounted for among the police and fire as they do their spot roll calls to relocate everybody who responded are growing.
Stay with me for just a second, because I want to talk very briefly who's on the telephone. Gary Breeze, who's the head of the International Association of Firefighters, who will have been in contact with the fire departments here in New York City. Do you hear me, Mr. Breeze?
I can hear you, thank you.
I know exactly what your sentiments are today, and I think John Miller has made it very clear. Everybody runs and your people go in. But in your contacts today, we've been working with the notion that a couple of hundred firefighters may be missing. Do you know anything about this?
We still have several hundred firefighters unaccounted for. Fire Department of New York, when they send an initial assignment to the World Trade Center, it involves about 125 firefighters on the initial assignment. And without a doubt, when they realize the severity of the situation, they dispatch greater alarms and probably had between about 300 firefighters on the scene before the first collapse occurred. The issue here is now the criticality of the next 24 to 36 hours. We're moving from the initial impact of this incident to the rescue and recovery phases. And one of the challenges, as Jerry Howard was saying, is that the desire for rescue. We find statistically that about 90% of the people that are rescued from building collapses are rescued in the first 24 hours. So this next time period will be very critical for the rescue of injured people.
Now, Mr. Priest, as you have talked to your colleagues in New York, where are you, by the way?
I happen to be in Denver today.
Right. As you've talked to your colleagues in New York, do you get any sense from them about whether what you describe as rescue and recovery is going to be more recovery than rescue?
I think it's going to be both. The World Trade Center is a horrific disaster. The primary rescue efforts will be taking place in the buildings that surround the World Trade Center. We have some 8 urban search and rescue teams on the way there now, but they will take at least 24 hours to become operational.
Is this one of those situations where fire departments, not dissimilar from a forest fire, where fire departments are coming in from long distances, or is there enough men and material in the immediate area to help?
I think from the initial response, fire departments from the New York area, surrounding New York City, New Jersey, Connecticut, and maybe even Pennsylvania have already begun moving toward New York City. The urban search and rescue teams are coming from as far away as California.
What do you mean by an urban search and rescue team? Is this the same kind of team that would go to an earthquake?
Yes, these are the structural collapse rescue teams. And for New York City, there's 3 teams coming from California, 1 team coming from Massachusetts.
Mr. Breeze, let me interrupt you because we've had another building collapse. ABC's Bob Jameson. Bob. Bob Jameson? Okay. There has been another building collapse in lower New York. It may, and we won't even speculate as to what it is, but another building has collapsed. Just reconfirming that when the 2 trade towers collapse, you see people moving. These people are not as close as they look. They're at some distance away because the police have kept them at this distance. And another building, and maybe, John, you can recognize this, in this immediate area. I'm not going to speculate that it's number 7, but because a number of buildings in the immediate adjacent area are vulnerable.
This is looking towards the World Trade Center, and that dark building in the upper left-hand corner is the telephone company on West Street. So this is a few blocks north, looking south. This is from 6th Avenue and Canal Street, looking south.
And do we know how close either you, I'm going to bring George Stephanopoulos in a moment, do we know how close this collapse might have been to the trade towers? You know the streets well.
What you see, the smoke coming up from this, this structure, I'm trying to discern from the pictures if that is the bottom of the World Trade Center or another building.
Okay, the Associated Press is just reporting. George Stephanopoulos, are you in a position, we think this is Trade Center building number 7, which has collapsed?
Yes, I'm not positive, Peter, but we are pretty sure that it is. One of our crew here saw it go straight down, and you're now trained on the plume of smoke coming straight out of that building. It happened just moments ago. It happened within 5 minutes, and that looks to be certainly within that immediate vicinity of the Trade Center. It just went straight down.
Then in all likelihood, this is probably number 7, the building which...
It's the one... For several hours now, Peter, the police have been concerned that there was going to be another collapse. They were concerned that World Trade Center number 7 was the most likely to collapse, and it certainly is in that square where the World Trade Center was.
And there you get a good look from that graphic of the relationship between number 7 and the North and the South towers. And there's the World Financial Center down at the foot of the North Trade Towers. You may have been with us a little earlier on today when Betsy Stark, our business reporter, just pointed out the huge number of businesses that are in there. Morgan Stanley, I think it was, she said, had 50 stories in the one building. And there are also government buildings. New York State has offices in the Twin Trade Towers itself. The Port Authority.
Entities, the U.S. Customs Service, the United States Secret Service, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, which ironically is tasked with investigating explosives and post-blast scenes, are all headquartered in the buildings just beneath the World Trade Center's Twin Towers within the same complex. They're the lower buildings in the courtyard there. So obviously they've all been affected. And if in fact, as it appears, as you look here, you do not see 7 World Trade Center in this part of the skyline here. The brown granite and glass building that should be there does not appear in this frame. So if in fact it is the building that went down, it's an indicator that the decision to keep rescue workers out of the Twin Towers area was probably a wise one. It probably saved many more lives. Now, from this vantage point,
you cannot see it. It would just be to the north, to the lower right portion of your screen, right. Building number 7
it
there.
Would be that brown one just to the right of the Twin Towers, the lower one.
In the World Trade Center itself, Morgan Stanley has 21 floors. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey has half a dozen floors. One of the big risks service insurance companies, AON, has 3 floors in the North Towers. Empire Blue Cross has 7 floors in the South Tower. Another insurance company has 7 floors. Bank of America has 3 floors. Deutsche Bank, the German bank, now International Bank, has 3 floors as well. So And as John was talking there, the evocation a little bit of what happened in Oklahoma City is taking a look at the New York skyline there. And John, take us across the skyline there.
We're coming down from the Woolworth building. Right. You're seeing where number 7 World Trade Center once stood. Now you're seeing the building that would have been directly next to it. This brown building in the right corner of the frame was the next door neighbor to the building, which is now just a large puff of smoke. That's a telephone company facility that was directly across the street from what was a skyscraper.
But you were pretty sure when we were talking just a few minutes ago, based on talking to the cops and the fire department, that that building was essentially empty.
I was told that they had done an evacuation, and I had the impression it was complete because they weren't talking about a furious continuing of that. Of course, they had moved people, emergency people, out of the scene, but you still don't know. I mean, there's always a skeleton crew operating there. There was fire trucks and firefighters working from a distance to fight the fires in the rubble in the area. So while they hadn't had the full army of rescue workers that could have been there present, you didn't have that.
George Stephanopoulos. Go ahead, George.
As we said before, we're about 20 blocks away from the World Trade Center site, but we were getting some of the silt and debris up here, this far away from the World Trade Center. Secondly, Peter, there is a much more heightened activity from police cars, dump trucks, and other emergency vehicles now in the area. They're congregating about 3 blocks away and looking to go down towards the World Trade Center. We just saw 3 police cars go by and other cars that were completely covered in dust and debris.
Is Gary Breeze from the Firefighters Association still with us?
Yes, I am.
I'm sorry, Peter.
And I was just asking for Gary, do you know whether or not number 7 had been fully evacuated in the course of the last 7 or 8 hours?
No, not firsthand, but I can tell you that if it was possible to be evacuated, it would have been cleared out. You know, that's one of the first jobs that a firefighter will undertake, is getting the civilians out of the buildings. And I think it's reasonable, since they've had this much time, and it wasn't terribly structurally damaged in the initial blast, that they probably got everybody out.
Okay, Gary, thank you very much. And George, we'll let you all go back to working your sources at the minute. The Mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, is going to have another news conference in a little while to now, and there's no person in the city who has a better handle at this point on everything that is happening. He was a little reluctant, understandably, to give some sense of magnitude early on in terms of casualties, but he surely knew this was coming as we did. And while we are waiting for him, take a slight right turn here for the moment and talk to our aviation expert, John Nance. It's actually not a right turn. It takes us back to the very beginning of this day. John, are you there on the phone? John Nance?
Yes, I sure am, Peter. Can you hear me? Yes, Peter, can you hear me?
I can indeed, John. And one of the things that just comes as, I think, a shock to people today is that, for the most part, we thought that U.S. airliners were, if not immune from hijacking, were far better able to handle such situations. And we get 3 major aircraft on 2 major airlines in one day. How is it possible?
Peter, I think we've all been aware in commercial aviation that no matter how we hardened up the system against the casual hijacker, in other words, the middle case, or somebody who really isn't terribly well organized, we've always known that our vulnerability level remained very high for somebody who intended to commit suicide and who was determined to do a lot of planning to know exactly what to do and how to do it to break in. And I think that's what we have seen today. This is the type of threat that has been our worst nightmare as commercial air crews and in the commercial aviation business, because if we tried to harden our system against this, we'd get fewer than 20% of the normal air traffic in the air every day.
What do you mean by that? By harden the system against it, you'd only get 20% up every day?
Well, Peter, we don't know exactly how these people got on board. We don't know what happened, but El Al is a good example. They have not had an incident in a long, long time because they're extremely careful.
The Israeli airline.
If you travel with them, Yes, correct. If you travel with them, you are going to answer questions. You are going to be very carefully looked at. They know who they carry, and that's one reason they've been so safe. But if we tried to apply that same level of security to the entire civil air traffic system of the United States, we would cut down the amount of air traffic by, well, down to 1/5, and that's probably being conservative.
Is it your feeling, John, that at the moment, I realize you can't agree to this wholly given what's happened today, that the system is about as tight as the public will tolerate, given the extraordinary amount of air travel we do? That's an issue,
I think
right?
we can do what we, yeah, it is difficult, but I think we can do what we do a lot better, Peter. But I don't think that, basically, that we have a situation here in which we can get much more tight.
Now, John, I think it was you, or can you still hear me, John? John Nance can't hear me for a second, but while they try to reconnect us with him, because he's so good on this particular subjects, I think it was John or earlier who said that the modern airplane, the 757 and the 767, were both involved today, are such sophisticated aircraft in the cockpit that they're actually simpler to fly. And so it is clear, John believed earlier, that whomever did this today on board the aircraft itself had to have some knowledge of how to steer a plane into a building, because no one today has been able to believe that a commercial airline captain on a U.S. aircraft would not sacrifice his own life rather than fly his own airplane into a building full of people. John, I'm just reviewing. You back with me now? John Nance?
Yes, I'm back with you.
I'm just reviewing this notion you brought up earlier. I'm reviewing this notion you brought up earlier today, that someone who was determined to fly an aircraft into 2 buildings like this, 3 including the Pentagon, didn't have to be an expert flyer to get at the controls. Explain again, would you?
Well, I think anyone who has, in our terms, a licensed pilot, even somebody who flew a smaller airplane, could manipulate controls of a jetliner once it got in the air. The problem is that if you're doing the planning for something this heinous, and you want to make absolutely sure that all of your aircraft reach their targets, you're going to want to put pilots who have some exposure to this type of airplane, or at least this class of airplane, into those seats. And that's why I don't believe that we had anything other than pilots that were put into this position, and probably the air crews, I'm speculating wildly, obviously, but I would imagine that the air crews that were assigned to those flights were probably killed very rapidly.
So it would take a minimum of experience, but some familiarity with the cockpit of a 757 or a 67 to do what was done today.
I believe so, Peter, because, again, you know, that is what I'm saying. I'm saying that any pilot could get into those cockpits with an airplane in flight and physically pull and push and turn and manipulate that airplane. But if you're planning this and you want to make sure that they do it right and they don't mess it up somehow, you're going to want people that have had exposure to that class of airplane. And that's where I think we may end up seeing this investigation go.
And I actually think, if I recall correctly, that many hours ago you raised the notion, you raised the possibility that someone who did this had some time in a simulator.
There is a high likelihood that if you were going to plan this, again, over a period of time, a year or two, that you could, if you were the planning organization, find a way to get your pilots that you wanted trained into a simulator someplace in the world. There are a lot of 757 and 767 training, or a lot of it available. And, you know, our people train air crews from all over the world, our people meaning in the United States. We wouldn't necessarily have any clue of what was in their hearts or what they were planning to do if they came in the door from a legitimate carrier or even a private operator of a 757, because there are some private ones out there.
Thank you, John. Is there anything else you need to add? Please go ahead.
Yeah, just one other thing. This is an unusual situation, and one of the little flags in this, Peter, at this early stage is the fact that we're talking about only 757s and 767s. That is the only combination of big airplanes that have what we call a common type rating. In other words, if you're rated in one, you can fly the other. The cockpits are almost identical. And that may be of no consequence here. It may have simply been coincidental, but it also raises a little flag that maybe we are dealing with somebody who planned this on the basis of having trained for this type of airplane.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much indeed, which certainly speaks to the point that any number of analysts of terrorism, somebody said this morning, nobody wants to be described as an expert on terrorism today, as analysts of terrorism and terrorism activity, and who try to monitor it around the world as effectively as they can, have said this was today a very sophisticated operation. We do know now, we believe, that about 100 people are believed to have been killed or injured in today's attack on the Pentagon. And as John McCarthy from the Pentagon has said to us on several occasions, there is no guarantee that that is the final number. But currently, the information from the Pentagon is that 100 people are believed to have been killed or injured in today's attack. And you recall that Mayor Giuliani of New York, the closest he has come to giving casualty figures, which he's very understandably reluctant to do, that 2,100 people were injured, 600 taken to hospital, 1,500 walking wounded taken to Liberty State Park, which is on the other side of the Hudson River, actually in New Jersey, where the Statue of Liberty, all this in full view of the Statue of Liberty, and that various hospitals from New York City all the way to Canada are treating people today who have been somehow injured in this. Now, I want to talk to Lynn Scher, who has been following the aircraft all day. That is the American and United Airlines planes involved in these incidents. Lynn?
As you well know, the only video that we've seen of an actual crash was of that second flight. That was the United flight that crashed into the second World Trade Tower. What we're going to show you now is some very crude animation of the first flight. That was American Airlines 11. That's the flight from Boston to Los Angeles that went into the first World Trade Tower. What this is animation based on the track of the plane, data coming from the FAA. You're going to hear Walter Cross, the programmer, describing it.
The flight took an immediate hard left turn due south. The speed initially decreased by over 100 miles an hour and then increased to over 500. And then as it approached the New York area, it slowed to all the way down to about 300 knots. So and then tragically it impacted in the World Trade Center. American 11 was indeed the first flight. We have confirmed that of the two.
And that, again, that was the voice of Walter Cross, the programmer, who put that animation together. What that shows you is this flight on its way to Los Angeles headed due west and then made that very sharp turn. Mr. Cross also told us that there was an indication of some air violence right before that left-hand turn, violent changes in airspeed as the plane went off track to head into the World Trade Towers. On that flight, 92 people, not counting the hijacker. And Peter, I've done some very quick calculations. Of course, all of the planes involved in today's incidents were headed to California. 3 of them to Los Angeles, 1 to San Francisco, 2 had left Boston, 1 from Dulles, 1 from Newark Airport. Total number of passengers and crew, 266 people, not, of course, counting the hijackers. Peter?
Thanks very much, Lynn. And the issue of taking off from Boston and Dulles and all headed for California, John Miller raised the issue before of whether or not, there are lots of reasons, and again we'd be speculating, but he makes the point that aircraft taking off from Boston and Dulles outside Washington to go to California would have full loads of fuel on them, thereby creating a far greater explosive potential without having had to have explosives on board and getting them past U.S. security either at Dulles Airport or at Boston. 266 people on the aircraft alone today who have died in this attack on the United States and on the American people. Now, in our control room, somebody says there is a... Let me go first to Bill Blakemore and then perhaps to Joe Torres of WABC, our affiliate in New York. Bill Blakemore, you there? And I gather you saw number 7 come down.
Yes, I did, Peter. I'm standing right on the West Side Highway. The skyline of the financial district has changed again. Just a few minutes ago, I was talking to some people. I was facing north. I saw shock in their face, heard screams, spun around, and then we just watched the building fall in on itself. I believe we have a little bit of tape here. That's, Peter, it was an astonishing thing because the civilians who were standing around here were all amazed, but things have become so bizarre down here that the hundreds of firemen who were standing around looked at it, felt a bit shocked, but then just said, well, we're going to have even more work to do. Associate producer Lucy Kerrigan had been over near that building just a little bit earlier, and the policeman had told her that they feared the building was going to come down, that they were evacuating people from around it. So that's one little bit of good news, is that there may have been fewer casualties from this latest collapse than there otherwise might have been because they knew of the potential. But it's now still a very hot day here. The search and rescue operation is mounting even larger. There are dozens and dozens of fire trucks backed up on the West Side Highway, police trucks. There are what look like hundreds of volunteers who have showed up, who have been marshaled by the Red Cross, all with masks to avoid breathing in dust, but nobody can go in yet. We're still looking at buildings that are on fire down in the center of the financial district, and it's clearly a great deal of devastation. It's not too strong a word at all. It's going to take a while even to assess how bad it is.
Bill, do you have any idea whether or not other buildings in the immediate area are vulnerable at the moment, whether there's concern about any other building as there was about this additional one after the towers?
Well, from the angle I'm looking at, we can see one other building still on fire, and it seems to be on fire through the length of it. I would estimate that's like a 30 or 40, about a 30 or 40 story building. The problem for any one of us, of course, is that because of the other buildings down here still standing, which are so tall, you can't get a very clean view of the whole thing from the ground. But there's at least one, and it's clearly going to go on into the night. There's a lot of black smoke pouring out of that building now.
Thank you, Bill. We just stay with this photograph for this graphic for just a second. Well, no, there's number 7 coming down. When you think that part of the component of news coverage around the country every year is the excitement and the fun that people get watching an old building being demolished, and they wire it very carefully for days, and it's a very careful operation in order to make sure that a building comes down safely. I think the last one we saw was when they brought down one of the old casinos in Las Vegas. I mean, this is just stunning to see these things come down inside. In the case of the north and south towers there of the World Trade Center, come down within a couple of hours as a result of the structural damage, weakening that was done when these aircraft hit them. And now number 7, the World Trade Center, which is 47 stories tall. We're talking with the World Trade Center north and south 110 stories tall. An eerie experience to be in them at the best of times. They sway in the wind, and people have long had experiences with them, but those, and as Bill Blakemore said just a moment ago, the landscape of New York City has changed one again. And in this instance, it's not New York City, it's not New Yorkers' cities, it's everybody in the country's city at this moment, because this was an attack on the United States, no question about it. Everybody said it all day, a declaration of war, an act of war against the United States. We've had a number of politicians and commentators, us included, who were reminded that the last time there was an attack like this on the United States was Pearl Harbor, which finally induced the United States to get fully involved in World War II. And we're going to go on all day, and we'll continue throughout the night trying to get some grasp of this. What do we know at the moment? The President is on his way back to Washington, and we're not certain whether he's going to be helicoptered in from Andrews Air Force Base, which is tradition, but the security apparatus is concerned, and so he may come in a motorcade. I can't remember the last time a president went or came from Andrews Air Force Base in a motorcade. Even maybe the last time was Bill Clinton. No, I don't even think Bill Clinton at the end of his inauguration went out. But there's another example. And the president wants to speak to the nation. And Linda Douglas reports from Capitol Hill that the leadership in Congress tonight wants to have. You have who on the telephone? I didn't know that. I did not know that. I apologize. Thank you. First time I've heard about it. Judge Webster?
Peter.
I'm sorry, sir. I didn't know you were on the phone.
No, it's been very interesting, and I'm glad to listen.
Thank you, sir. This is Judge William Webster, the former director of the FBI, on the phone, one of the country, and the CIA as well, as my friend John Miller points out. Judge Webster, maybe you could help us understand many things, but at the outset, when this happened today, does this overwhelm the FBI and drive the CIA into some kind of turmoil at the same time?
When it happened today, is that your question?
Yes, sir.
It seemed to me that they responded quickly. The FBI's emergency operations centers were in place. CIA, of course, is going back to its intelligence and see what they had, what they didn't have. I think what you usually find in a situation like that is grim determination to do a good job. I don't think it's any kind of frustration or frenzy.
And as you have watched these events unfold today, and perhaps even talked to your colleagues, your former colleagues in the FBI and the CIA, what's your appreciation of this as a whole event?
Well, it's an extraordinary event, and it brings home what we've been saying about the change of terrorism in the last 20 years, as it moves from fewer numbers, trying to make a political point, to doing extreme damage, and this reached a high level of capacity to do damage in that way, and it needs to be addressed as such. When you think about what has happened today and the tremendous tragedy and calamity, it didn't involve nuclear weapons, it didn't involve biological weapons, it didn't involve equipment, artillery, Scuds, or anything. It involved the ability to steal 4 or 5 airplanes and to send them on a course of destruction. That's within the capacity of non-governmental organizations such as the kind you've been talking about.
And do you believe, Judge Webster, because there's a lot of armchair observation today, and I don't mean to include you in that, a lot of armchair observation from many of us, do you believe that this in any way, shape, or form could have been prepared for, if not prevented?
You'd like to think that you could prepare for every kind of calamity, but you also like to think that we live in a society that we're very proud of in terms of the freedoms we enjoy, and the freedoms to travel is one of those. Freedom from violence is another one, to the extent that we can know about it. Knowing is the difficult thing. In my years of experience, terrorism was the most difficult because of the cellular nature of decision-making at the top. Even the people who were in the organization would not know until the last minute what was going to take place. I hope we can develop better means of profiling the kinds of people who could do damage, and I'm not talking about highway racial profiling or anything. I'm talking about looking for people that fit profiles of behavior that would be more helpful.
As I listen to you say that, Judge Webster, I think about Timothy McVeigh. Nobody had Timothy McVeigh down as a profile.
No, they didn't. But if they had...
in Oklahoma City, and many of the profiles we do seem to be the obvious ones. Pick on a member of a developing nation because the nation is antagonistic, or the group because it's antagonistic to the United States. I mean, is this the most efficient way to do it?
No, I think that was just one of the things that we're trying to say, should we tighten up? It's not clear to me that we don't know enough yet to draw any firm conclusions about whether or not people were able to walk on board those airplanes with weapons that passed through the screening devices. We just don't know yet, and we shouldn't draw conclusions about that. But I think we have to be sure that we have done everything we can to know in advance. Getting there before the bomb goes off is the ultimate objective. And it requires a lot of cooperation now internationally. We have to share information with our friends around the world about movements of people who are believed to be bent on violence. It's a very tough assignment, and it's one in which we can see now we're going to have tighten our belts, because I think, again, when the reports of the casualties is finally released, it's going to be a lot more than anybody expected, and probably will be more, or at least approximate the size. We haven't had anything like it since Pearl Harbor.
Judge Webster, I don't mean to make you the target of criticism today. It's not my intention at all. But as I listen to you talk about we got to tighten our belt and our defenses, it's what we hear after almost every incident of terrorism. And I wonder what you think, as you've listened and watched today, what you think more could be done that the United States hasn't been doing up until now that is humanly possible in a free society.
I think we've been very educated and sophisticated in knowing what we needed to do. The counter-terrorist centers that have been formed to be sure that information is properly recognized and passed along to the people. Those are things that can, in an evolutionary way, can be improved. Human intelligence, of course, is what everyone will call for now, and we should have it. But we shouldn't fool ourselves that it's something we can automatically take off the shelf and put in place in terrorist organizations.
At the time that human intelligence, human you call it in your trade, was downgraded as part of the national effort against terrorism, were you supportive of it being downgraded?
Actually, that was before I came on board. It seems to me that we've been trying ever since 1978 to improve, or at least 1980, to improve the quality of human intelligence. And in some cases, we were very successful. I recall the ability, the Armenian terrorist incidents in the late 1970s and 80s, we were able to get there and interdict the bombs, one in San Francisco, one in Los Angeles, one with explosives en route to New York, and the other in Canada. We know what we need to do, and in some cases we can do it, but we're dealing with some very, very powerful and sophisticated competition here.
Judge Webster, I'm very grateful you joined us. I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but I have one more question for you. Whenever there's a debate or a discussion about the freedom of Americans and the freedom of movement Americans should enjoy under these circumstances, the director of the FBI is always right there at the center. And there's always a debate, there's always an inclination to think that you and the FBI, you want to make it tougher for Americans to move about because it's easier for you to do your job under those circumstances. What's your message to the American people today about retaining their freedoms in the face of this kind of enemy?
I think the message is that we can't have a pendulum swinging back and forth from repression to anarchy. And I think we've done a pretty good job of finding that center, which Edmund Burke 300 years ago called ordered liberty.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have liberty, but it has to be one accompanied by order. And professionals are very willing to do their job under court orders and the appropriate procedures. All that they ask is that they not be unduly burdened by restrictions that in times like this get in the way of finding the culprits and bringing them to justice.
Judge Webster, thank you very much for giving us the time. We'd like to hear from you later on, so we're very grateful to you at the moment. Thank you. Two things the judge said.
Thank you, Peter.
Welcome, sir. Two things the judge says which just leap off the page, John Miller, to me. Clearly, one is the Edmund Burke quote when he talks about liberty. It has to be ordered liberty. And the other, in terms of talking about the capacity of the terrorists today, said there were no scuds involved. There was just the capacity to steal 4 planes.
And we had talked earlier about airline security. How do you get a gun on an airplane? Unconfirmed reports from these cellular phone calls that were made to 911 from one of the flights saying that a flight attendant had been stabbed. Perhaps they didn't have a gun. Certainly, the GAO and the General Accounting Office of Congress and the FAA and airline securities consultants have demonstrated over and over again that if you're careful enough and you plan it, you can get a weapon onto a plane. And they've demonstrated exactly how, which I won't describe here for obvious reasons.
Right.
So this is security that's designed to harden the target, the airplane. Certainly, there's no such thing as total security there. And terrorism, I mean, if you look at this most incredible, unprecedented, historic act of terrorism, it still harkens back to what we see in the World Trade Center, Oklahoma City, the embassy bombings. We talk about the level of sophistication in planning, maybe, but the actual act is usually very low tech. A bomb made of fertilizer and fuel oil, things you can look up and buy on the internet, hijacking an airplane, perhaps even with sharpened instruments. Now, the aspect that there may have been people trained to fly these planes, that's a new wrinkle.
That is indeed.
Certainly on conventional hijacking. I can give you an update from the scene as things are developing there. If there can be any good news about a day like today, the collapse of 7 World Trade Center, the building they were so worried about injuring rescue workers, has freed up rescue workers to now go into the area, and they are moving in groups of 20 and 50 as their teams are designated.
So the principal danger to the rescue and recovery teams has been eliminated.
The biggest danger has literally removed itself. Right. One of the first teams going in is a team of tow trucks, which is literally going to pull rigs that are fire trucks, police trucks that are buried in rubble out of the way so that they can clear a path and bring in other vehicles. And they've requested a number of dogs. Additionally, 100 doctors...
I'm sorry to keep interrupting.
Sure.
Explain why they want dogs.
They want bloodhounds, cadaver dogs, the kind of dogs that can climb up in the rubble with them and catch the scent of people that they can dig for in such a big pile of rubble.
It is a strange name for a specialty, but there are indeed things called cadaver dogs. Anybody who called it the Condit investigation know that they were used in, et cetera. Go on,
right.
Please.
100 doctors, 100 nurses are standing by the main police facility that is now the command post for the NYPD, not police headquarters, but an off-site location further up into Midtown, has them standing by waiting for somewhere to send them. And essentially, this this long operation, which will be the longest night for New York's rescue workers, has just begun.
And thank you, John. And Cynthia McFadden, I believe, is now at Chelsea Piers, a large sports entertainment complex on the west side of Manhattan, or at least close to it, which, Cynthia, was described earlier as a makeshift morgue. Is that really what it's going to be?
No, it's not, Peter. What they've decided to do here is make this the triage center. We've been told that all victims now who are taken out of the blast site are going to be taken here first. They'll be tagged before they get here, determine what the severity of their condition is, and then once they arrive here, they'll be treated initially and then sent on to other hospitals. I should also tell you that inside this has been described to me, you can see behind me, ambulances. What you can't see probably is that there are probably 200 or 250 ambulances lined up here on the west side highways, waiting. These are empty ambulances waiting to distribute patients or potential victims all over the tri-state area to hospitals. Peter, inside, it's been described, we got a look inside earlier, it really looks like a MASH unit. It's 50 operating suites set up, hundreds of doctors and nurses here to treat the wounded. They have been here, standing here for hours now. There are no patients here yet. The latest estimate is that there won't be any people here for several more hours. What we're told is, and I was just listening to John Miller, part of the problem initially was that when the first rescue workers went in, and we've talked to some of them who have, some of the second wave of rescue workers, the first wave of rescue workers who went in were trapped, many of them killed by the second blast. And so when the second workers came out, many of whom are now here, they wouldn't allow anyone back in the area, which is why there aren't any patients here at the moment.
Well, Cynthia, let me just go a little farther with that. You say 250 ambulances standing around waiting to pull people out. You'd be talking about pulling people out of the rubble at this point. The mayor reminded people across the country there are 170 hospitals in New York City, and aside from St. Vincent's, the principal nearest hospital, which lost, among other things, its emergency power, I think, and lost its gas operating facility at the time, wasn't it, John?
That was Beekman Downtown, or New York Infirmary, that lost its steam power. St. Vincent's then actually had to bear the brunt of this.
And so people have gone directly to hospital. I don't quite understand, Cynthia, who's going to come to Chelsea Piers until they begin to rescue people, hopefully, from the rubble itself.
Peter, the initial thought, and of course, as you know, we've been to Bellevue today, a couple of other places. There have been hundreds of people at area hospitals, as you note, but they don't believe that anywhere near the full weight of this has yet been uncovered, that there are hundreds and thousands of people who have been injured in this blast, and that's the people that they expect to bring here.
Okay.
St. Vincent's is saturated at this point. They're intending, now whether this happens, but the emergency medical services that's running this medical operation intends to bring no more patients directly to hospitals. They will all be brought here first for medical attention and for triage out to other hospitals.
From WFAA-TV, Channel 8, the Spirit of Texas, this is News 8's continuing coverage of America Under Attack.
What's happening? That was like a ball of fire.
It was bad. It hit in One World Trade Center, it hit somewhere on the 67th floor.
This is where Jerry is.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gloria Campos, WFAA News. We now know some more information this afternoon. We do not know if it's related. We have a report from CNN.
That's right. We want to take CNN Network now live because we have an unconfirmed report that there are some explosions in Afghanistan. Let's go to CNN now.
We're having difficulty reaching you on another line, but please keep your line up. We can see the pictures coming to us by the video phone. Again, this is very advanced technology that CNN is using, but you will see some of the digital effect. It is not quite as clear as your average television signal, and so to our viewers, we apologize for that. But this is certainly the only video that you're going to get
from Kabul, Afghanistan at this point, and you're watching it on CNN. Again, we are hearing from our correspondent, Nick Robertson, who's on the scene in Kabul with his team there, and he has reported the sounds of tracer fire. He has reported the fire burning there in Kabul, the seat of Afghanistan's power, the seat of its Taliban government. Again, we are watching their picture coming to us on the video phone, and it is very hard, of course, to see exactly what you're looking at. But you are looking at Kabul. Again, you see some tracer fire there coming across the scene. Nick Robertson, can you hear us?
We're being told, Joey, I can hear you if you can hear me. Certainly, big detonation there, missiles flying across the city. We're being told from sources in Kandahar, that's the spiritual capital of Afghanistan, 300 miles south of here, that there is no rocket activity like this south of here in Kandahar. Certainly in Kabul, very, very active at this stage. Multiple detonations. It is nighttime here. It is dark. It is difficult to get an accurate fix on exactly what we're seeing and exactly what we're hearing. Certainly the sound, what appears to be the sound of large missiles incoming and landing in the city. Certainly a big fire on the horizon of the city at the moment. And certainly anti-aircraft fire coming up from the city and rockets being launched and flying across the horizon of the city. Rockets perhaps going at the speed of several hundred miles an hour, the sort of speed that one might expect to see cruise missiles traveling across the horizon at, burning with a white glow coming from their tails rather than a yellow glow. The fire on the horizon that we can see from here burning furiously now. Perhaps it would be accurate at this stage to suspect that that was a fuel dump that's been hit by the way that it's burning, flames leaping, and that fuel dump must be perhaps 5 to 8 miles from where I am. Flames leaping up from that fuel dump now leaping up right into the air. It was a low-burning fire before, but it's now really increased in its ferocity, perhaps indicating that it is a fuel dump. Looking across the rest of the city, that fuel dump, perhaps the only big fire we can see at this time. From our vantage point here at the Kabul Intercontinental Hotel that overlooks the whole of the city of Kabul, that is in a basin surrounded by mountains, the whole city is laid out in front of us. The gunfire that was coming up from the city seems to have subsided for now. We're not hearing any more detonations at this moment. And as I say, the fire on the horizon really burning furiously at this time, flames leaping way up in the air this moment. Joey?
Nick, if you can talk to us a little bit about your circumstance. It is 6 o'clock in the evening here in Atlanta. It must be quite late at night there in Kabul.
Indeed, 2:30 in the morning here, Joey. We're eight and a half hours ahead of East Coast time in the United States. And it was about 5 hours ago that the Foreign Minister of Afghanistan, Wakil Ahmed Mutawakil, briefed journalists. I hear more detonations going off now. He said that the Taliban had not taken precautions against the possibility of there being an air attack against Afghanistan. He said because it was not necessary. The Taliban spiritual leader, Mullah Omar, had also made a statement saying that they felt Osama bin Laden wasn't responsible for what had happened in the United States. He said his country was a peaceful country. He wanted it to be at peace, and he wanted peace in other countries around the world. Certainly what we're seeing in Kabul these early hours of this Wednesday morning is very far from peace. Certainly multiple explosions happening in and around the city. There is a front line about 50 miles north of the city where the Taliban are fighting a battle against the Northern Alliance here. We could hear detonations coming from that northern area as well. But on the perimeter of the city, particularly in the direction of the Kabul airport, which is about 5 to 8 miles from where we are, detonations coming from there. I remember standing on this balcony about 4 years ago watching fighter jets bomb that airport as part of Afghanistan's ongoing civil war. The flash at the airport to us hearing the detonation at the hotel is about the same duration, so I am using that as an estimate
to gauge that those missiles again are falling in the area of the airport. First, we're seeing the flash, and then we hear the detonation some several seconds afterwards, and they appear to be coming from that airport area, in some cases several miles away from us. There are still a lot of flashing we can see in the air reflected off clouds. That could be thunder and lightning. However, there's a possibility that those reflections are missiles landing elsewhere, the flashes as they explode and reflecting off the clouds. But it's not a good indication. We certainly don't hear any detonations coming from that particular direction at this time. The anti-aircraft fire that we were seeing a little while ago is not coming up from the city. The city, apart from the detonations we were hearing a few minutes ago, appears very, very calm. The visibility here is excellent. We can see all the way across the city. It lies on a plain that's surrounded by the mountains here in Kabul. We have high mountains to the right. These mountains were used by the Mujahideen as vantage points for shelling the city several years ago during the Mujahideen infighting in Kabul. The last 5 years, the Taliban have been in control of this city, have been trying to extend their control over and across Afghanistan. And the Foreign Minister this evening telling journalists and CNN that he didn't believe that Afghanistan would be attacked. He said if Afghanistan was attacked, then they would call it, the Taliban would call it, an act of state-sponsored terrorism, Joey.
All right, that is CNN's Nick Robertson. Again, please keep the line open to us. Nick Robertson there in Kabul, Afghanistan. For our viewers who are watching this with us on the air, again, we're getting this from video phone technology. You're seeing this exclusive.
Once again, that report from Nick Robertson at CNN in Kabul, Afghanistan, unsure who has launched a firefight, an apparent firefight against Afghanistan. But we will be checking in on that and bring you more details as they become available.
Yes, Afghanistan, of course, is where a lot of people believe that Osama bin Laden has been sheltered. And, of course, we won't know for sure if the U.S. is involved in that at all until the president speaks to the nation tonight. He's expected to speak at about 8 o'clock our time. All right, let's talk about New York, what happened in New York. A hijacked American flight, flight number 11, hit the first tower of the World Trade Center at 7:45 this morning our time. About 15 minutes later, another hijacked airliner, United Flight 175, hit the second tower. That tower collapsed just before 9 o'clock this morning. The first tower that was hit collapsed half an hour later. Within the last half hour, a third building at the World Trade Center complex came crashing down. 7 World Trade Center, adjacent to the Twin Towers, had been weakened during this morning's explosion. Collapsed 7 hours later. It's a 47-story building. It had already been evacuated, so that's good news. It has, though, been burning all day. Smoke continues to billow above the New York skyline.
But to comprehend the magnitude of what happened this morning, we'll show you some videotape shot by a freelance photographer standing below the World Trade Center tower. There you see his camera caught the second airliner, United Flight 175, as it slammed into the second tower. The plane then disappeared into the building in a huge fireball.
The horrible acts unfolded in less than 2 hours. Our coverage of America Under Attack begins with Channel 8's Marianne Razouk, who shows us how it all happened.
There is one report, as of yet unconfirmed, that a plane has hit the World Trade Center. And you can
a distant billow of smoke emerging from a World Trade Center tower. At first glance, appeared to be a small fire that started inside. But the building masked the horrific reality that hijacked American Airlines Flight number 11 slammed into the side of one of the Twin Towers.
Yeah, now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
Has just I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
18 minutes later, a second jetliner, United Airlines Flight 175, plowed into the South Trade Center tower, sending flames and wreckage plummeting 110 floors down to the busy New York street below. Hundreds of commuters and pedestrians ran to escape falling debris, while others stood and watched in shock as Trade Center workers jumped from windows more than 50 stories high to escape the inferno.
There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows.
Amidst the chaos and panic, federal authorities mobilized by grounding all flights nationwide, closing U.S. borders, and evacuating key federal and military buildings and installations. Facing the biggest test of his 8-month presidency, President George Bush cut short a trip to Florida and announced what he called a terrorist attack on our country.
And to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
25 minutes after his words of reassurance to the American people, the gravity of the assault was magnified by yet another kamikaze airplane attack.
It came in at such a deep angle and such fast speed. It was, the severity of, like I was telling the gentleman, it was a real severe intention.
American Airlines Flight 77, carrying 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots, plunged into the side of the nerve center of our nation's military, the United States Pentagon.
It came streaking down and it hit short. It didn't go into the top of the Pentagon. It came like in short, and then everything sprayed up like a fireball sprayed up on the wall.
This is uncalled for. And the worst part about it is there ain't nobody to fight.
More than 40 victims that reportedly include top military officials were rescued from a collapsed section of the 5-sided structure. Vice President Dick Cheney, First Lady Laura Bush, and congressional leaders were evacuated from White House and Capitol locations and rushed to an undisclosed and secure facility as military brass prepared for the possibility of more assaults. In a 4th and final incident, a United Airlines Boeing 757 carrying 45 people crashed southeast of Pittsburgh. The disaster happened nearly an hour and a half after the first catastrophic attack in the heart of New York City, where authorities fear the injuries and loss of life could easily be in the tens of thousands. Marianne Razouk, Channel 8 News.
As chaos and terror gripped New York and Washington, the White House tried to reassure Americans that the United States government continues to run smoothly.
The federal government is acting to help local communities with search and rescue and emergency management operations, to take all appropriate precautions to protect our citizens, and to identify those responsible for these despicable attacks.
Speculation about the attack quickly focused on terrorist fugitive Osama bin Laden, but Afghanistan's hardline Taliban rulers quickly condemned the attacks and rejected suggestions that bin Laden was behind them. PLO leader Yasser Arafat weighed in, expressing condolences for the victims. But in East Jerusalem, Palestinians took to the streets and celebrated when they heard news of the attacks. Here's a rundown now on all 4 hijacked planes involved in today's orchestrated attack. The 2 planes that hit the World Trade Center were Boeing 767s. American Flight 11 was en route from Boston to Los Angeles with 92 people on board. United Flight 175 was bound from Boston to Los Angeles with 65 people on board. The 2 other downed airliners were United Flight 93 flying from Newark to San Francisco with 45 people on board. Flight 93 went down southeast of Pittsburgh. American Flight 77 was flying from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles with 64 people on board. It crashed into the west wall of the Pentagon.
We want to let you know we're going to continue to cover this story with the Texas angles, but if anything else does happen, we will go to either ABC or CNN to keep you up to date as much as possible on what's going on. Also, we mentioned that we showed you at the top of the newscast about the fire and the possible missile attack in Kabul. A U.S. official believes now that the explosions there are not a U.S. action. So we will find out more about that for you, hopefully have some more coming up from Network at the end of this newscast. All right, in Texas, in Austin, security was increased at the state capitol and at the state's National Guard headquarters today. While most state offices remained open, Governor Rick Perry did give employees the opportunity to go home, and he urged all Texans to remain calm.
I think it is very important to note that there are no known threats to the state of Texas. State government continues to remain open and operating as normally as possible under the scenario that we find ourselves in today. I think it's best for Texans to continue with their normal routines while continue to pray for our nation.
Governor Perry called New York's governor and offered to send the state's emergency response team for urban disasters. That team of 62 is now on alert. Here in North Texas, as in every other metropolitan center, the FBI will assume responsibility for the overall investigation. The special agent in charge of the Dallas division held a news conference this afternoon. Channel 8's Jeff Brady joins us now from the FBI's downtown Dallas offices for that part of the story. Jeff?
That's right, Scott. The FBI called this press conference this afternoon, but they invited many other municipal agencies and civic leaders to take part. In fact, agents handed out a press release today listing more than 20 different law enforcement agencies all across North Texas, which will be helping FBI agents in North Texas investigate these attacks today. But the top priority for civic leaders today was to calm the city. They encouraged prayer and patience in the days ahead, prayer for those grieving families, and patience for any North Texans who need to use Love Field or DFW International Airport.
And we've had all too horrible and tragic reminder today of the need for that security. So for those of you who will be flying in the days and weeks ahead, we respectfully urge your patience and your cooperation.
And that's the strongest thing that all of us could do, is to be in prayer for not only our city, but those loved ones and those people that we lost today.
Chief Bolton added that he did call for a stepped-up police presence in downtown Dallas today, and that increased presence would continue as long as it's appropriate. However, the top question facing local FBI agents is there a North Texas connection to the attacks that took place today? Particularly in light of a federal search warrant that was executed last week on September 5th in Richardson at the office of Infocom Corporation, which is an internet services business serving many foreign websites. Special Agent in Charge Danny Deffenbaugh expressed confidence in the thoroughness of the investigation, but he could say little beyond that.
Right now, I will tell you, particularly with the 28 agencies that we have working here together, that it is a total intelligence effort. If there is information there that would cause us to have to react, I feel very confident that we're going to be able to do so because of every one of the different agencies. If you look at that list, we're talking about every agency within the Metroplex, both state, local, federal, and other agencies that would be able to give out information. We'll be able to react to those. As far as the active investigations, I can't discuss them.
And Scott and Gloria, FBI agents also commended the many North Texans who have already been calling in tips to the FBI office here. In fact, they've received so many tips just today that they've set up a separate voicemail line to record those tips and suggestions from North Texans. That number is on your screen now, 214-922-7796. That's an FBI tip line. They want to encourage people to continue to call in tips and suggestions, and they assured all of us today, and all North Texans, in fact, that they will pursue each and every one of those tips. Reporting live from the FBI offices in downtown Dallas, I'm Jeff Brady. Gloria and Scott, back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Jeff. And joining us now is Paul Coggins, former U.S. Attorney of North Texas. Thank you for joining us. I guess one of the things that stands out in my mind is when we heard the rescue worker just minutes ago say the trouble about this attack, and we've never seen an attack of this magnitude in our country and certainly anywhere else, is that who do we fight? Who do we find?
The most important thing is this investigation is going to be a marathon and not a sprint. We have to prepare ourselves. It's going to take perhaps years to get to the bottom of this. It will require an international response to get to the bottom of this. And so we've got to be in it for the long haul, and we really, as the world superpower, have to set up an international initiative to track down these people wherever they go in the world, whether they're sponsored by a state or not, and to bring them to justice.
Paul, former Secretary of State James Baker said earlier this afternoon in one of the newscasts that back in the mid-70s there was a Senate inquiry, a Congress inquiry, and they cut down on the human intelligence factor, and that's what we need to get back to. Do you agree with that?
Well, certainly we have to look at a number of issues coming out of this. We have to look at issues of intelligence. Are we gathering enough intelligence, both internationally and domestically, because we have put strictures on some of our agencies. Number two, airline security is going to be a major, major issue that's going to be looked into. And obviously, right now, I can tell you what's happening. They're in a command center at the Department of Justice assembling a team to investigate this and prosecute this even as we speak. Not only in Washington, D.C., but in Dallas and New York. They've got to coordinate those teams, pull the best people together, and as I said, reach out internationally to bring these people to justice if they prove to be overseas.
And pay for information?
Absolutely. Be willing to pay.
All right. Thank you very much, Paul
Thanks,
Coggins,
Paul.
who's the former U.S. Attorney for North Texas. For the first time ever, the nation's airports are shut down today. Shortly after today's attacks, the FAA ordered all airplanes in the air to land at the nearest airport, and no commercial airliners will be allowed to fly until at least noon tomorrow. That has stranded thousands of travelers, and we have reports from Channel 8's Melissa Tamplin, Jim Douglas, and Byron Harris. And we start with Melissa Tamplin at DFW Airport. Melissa?
Well, Gloria and Scott, it's amazing to see DFW Airport vacated in this way. Usually on a Tuesday afternoon, you would see thousands of travelers passing through here, but today travel came to a halt as word was released about the hijackings. And the eeriest part of it all was to look in the faces of the passengers as they learned about the news. One by one, they gathered in disbelief.
It's pretty terrifying. A lot of humans in there.
Each of them watching as the events of the day unfolded.
It looks like it's falling, the building's falling down.
Looks like that other tower could also collapse.
By my reckoning, I don't know the exact time, but about 8:45.
It's just insane.
No flights will be operating the remainder of the day throughout the nation.
Although the FAA's ban on nationwide flights left many of them stranded, these passengers can't seem to break away from the television or from the shock of what has happened.
The notion to shut down, this is unprecedented, to shut down all the airplanes in the United States of America, what it does to us, it's just unbelievable. It's catastrophic.
Loved ones who could leaned on each other for support, while others called home to say they're okay.
I'm safe. I'm on the ground.
Security remained tight throughout the morning as passengers rescheduled their flights. Crew members tried to hold back emotion, wondering if it could have been someone they knew. But everyone here is left with the same question. Who would do this to us, and why?
It's hard to know what to make of it, what somebody thinks that this is going to accomplish.
It's surreal. It's like I almost feel like either throwing up, crying. I think of all the loss. I think of the senseless, this act that makes no sense to anybody. And I think of retaliation. I mean, that's the first thought you have as a human. It's like what they did to us, we got to come back.
And no one will be traveling out of DFW or any other airport tonight. Most people today either took a taxi or rented a car and went to a nearby hotel. Now, 2 of the planes that were hijacked and crashed into buildings were American Airlines jets. And joining me now is Jim Douglas from the American Airlines headquarters with more on reaction there. Jim?
Melissa, American Airlines isn't answering any questions tonight, not holding any press conferences. However, we did learn this morning about a phone call that came in about 7:45 to the American Airlines Operations Center. That's about the time of the first impact on the World Trade Centers in New York. ABC News is now reporting that that phone call came from a flight attendant on Flight 11, a Boeing 767. She was apparently on her cell phone. She reportedly said that the plane had been hijacked, that 2 flight attendants had been stabbed, that a person or persons had broken into the cockpit. Now, we have no confirmation on that from American Airlines tonight. The company is referring all questions to the FBI. However, this morning, company spokesman Al Becker did give us some informal comments.
Well, obviously, it's a matter of deep regret that the incident occurred, and we are working completely with the FBI on every aspect of the investigation.
Do you ever think you'd see something like this?
Well, this is an extraordinary circumstance, certainly.
Is it anything you all tried to prepare for?
Well, it's just, there's enough.
Flags are flying at half-staff at the American Airlines headquarters, and flowers have started to show up in the lobby here. The company released 2 press releases today, the first confirming that 2 of its planes were involved in these terrorist attacks, the second this afternoon confirming that all American Airlines planes are on the ground and accounted for. I'm Jim Douglas reporting live from the American Airlines headquarters, and now let's go to Byron Harris at DFW Airport Operations Center. Byron?
Jim, there's an eerie sound out here this afternoon. No sound at all. 1,500 flights that were supposed to land and take off today never did. Parking toll booths are empty. No traffic. Airliners, 156 of them, totally shut down. Cargo operations stalled. It doesn't look like the 4th busiest airport in the world.
Terminals are now, for the most part, empty. And in fact, as of 2 minutes ago, we reported only 5 individuals that still needed some assistance.
Our security teams are doing continuous sweeps of all terminal areas. What we call the sterile areas, the gate and concession areas past the security checkpoints, will remain shut down indefinitely.
Now, Jim Kreitz says the FAA will resume flights tomorrow. They're aiming for noon. Security will be improved, but he won't say how. It will require patience and, of course, courage on the part of travelers to fly in the air tomorrow. This is Byron Harris live at DFW Airport.
Byron, thank you very much for that live report. I want to bring you up to date on the financial aspect of these attacks. First of all, the stock market is not going to be open tomorrow. They decided not to open that. The U.S. financial regulators also say the futures security markets will be closed tomorrow as well. And we have also had a bulletin from AP saying that a Pentagon official says that those explosions in Kabul, Afghanistan, were not a U.S. strike. Once again, the president will be speaking to the nation tonight at 8 o'clock our time, so we'll get more information then. Now, while these attacks were unfolding on the East Coast this morning, no one knew just where tragedy would strike again. So in North Texas, many of the high-rises were evacuated. Channel 8's Chris Heinbaugh joins us now with that part of the story. Chris?
That's right, Scott. Usually, you know, at this time of the evening, the streets are packed with traffic downtown. As you can see, though, it's flowing smoothly, and in fact, comparatively speaking, it's like a ghost town downtown. Thousands of people cleared out this morning.
The tension in the air was thick as thousands poured out of several local businesses and high-rises.
The building's closed. They're asking everybody to leave.
The local World Trade Center closed, Bank One and Renaissance Tower evacuated, as well as the city's signature high-rise, Bank of America Plaza.
We're the tallest building in the city. We're in the state of President Bush, and B of A being Bank of America, there were concerns, I think, countrywide.
Workers inside the 70-story structure had watched the day's events unfold on TV, making those high above the streets very aware of their offices in the sky.
I'm pretty much up there, and I called my wife and told her to start praying.
To handle the extra crush of people trying to get home, DART added extra buses and light rail. It didn't matter. Traffic crawled as garages emptied stunned drivers onto downtown streets.
I'm in shock, like most Americans. We always thought there might be a day when we'd be proven to be vulnerable, and I think we're all in just disbelief.
Evacuations were calm, but not without mishaps. Fire officials say this woman was hurt in the rush to get out. Dallas police were taking no chances overhead or on the ground,
If you don't mind just stepping over there,
where frustration, fear was evident everywhere.
I can't get through either.
Cell phone service was overloaded as people tried to reach out just to reassure themselves loved ones were okay.
It's extremely scary. People are worried about their families, about their children. It's a scary time. It's hard to believe this is going on.
You get kind of freaked out about things, but I mean, I guess it's a little farther than New York City or DC, but it still affects you.
Affects you, numbs you.
Indeed, several of the buildings downtown will be open tomorrow, and from what we understand, City Hall will be back to normal. People are trying to keep things as normal as possible, not let terrorism have its intended effect, but still it has affected all of us. And of course, not only in Dallas, Channel 8's Karen Kelly joins us now live from Fort Worth. Karen?
Well, Chris, most of downtown Fort Worth remained open today, including City Hall that you see behind me. But city leaders took the first step in preparing for an emergency. They opened the Emergency Operations Center, located under City Hall on the south end of downtown.
There's no reason to believe that we face any kind of special threat here in the Metroplex. I think the main thing we've tried to do today is make sure all lines of communication are open, and if any threats of any kind come along, then we're in a position to respond.
And now City Hall is back to a level 1. That's about the same status as if a grass fire was burning, and we were on readiness, on alert for that. I'm Karen Kelly reporting live in Fort Worth. Back to you in the studio.
Thank you very much, Karen. And of course, we'll be joining ABC momentarily for their continuous coverage. An emergency call for blood went out in New York today, and North Texans halfway across the country were quick to answer. Channel 8's Macy Jepson joins us now live from a Carter blood drive at Reunion Arena in Dallas. Macy?
Well, Gloria, if you ever wondered if there would ever be a huge event at Reunion Arena again, you've gotten your answer now. It is a huge blood drive put on by Carter Blood Center. A lot of people have already come today and donated blood. About 1,500 people are expected to walk through these doors. What you see now are people who are diligently waiting in line in the heat, and with them they have reminders, this extra edition of the Dallas Morning News in the middle. Second Pearl Harbor is what it says. People are reminded everywhere around around them of the reason they are here. They are hoping that they can help save lives among those who were harmed in the terrorist attacks in New York and in Washington, D.C. Above them is also a reminder, and those are flags that have flown half-staff all day long. Again, about 1,500 people are expected to come through these doors today. This national tragedy has hurt the pride of America, but civic pride has come to life.
I'm a universal donor, O negative blood type, so anytime major things happen, I come down to give blood.
It's very important for Carter Blood Care to be sure that we have an ample supply here in the Metroplex to service our North Texas hospitals. This has been a very chaotic, very unpredictable type of situation, and our primary responsibility is to be sure that our local needs are met, whatever they may be.
And that supply has been met, and in the next 24 hours, the blood donated here will be ready to go. Now, this area will be open until 8 o'clock tonight. All 13 Carter Blood Centers will be open tomorrow from 8 until 8. Will Rogers Coliseum, Amon Carter Exhibit Hall together will be open from 11 until 8 tomorrow. Now, they ask that you go to the website and look at criteria for donations. That's carterbloodcare.org. You can also call the toll-free number 1-800-DONATE-4 for more information. This is a time that we as Americans are hurting, and we're wondering how we can make a difference. Giving the gift of life will certainly do that. I'm Macy Jepson reporting live from Reunion Arena. Back to you in the studio.
Yes, besides giving blood, the question on the minds of many North Texans also could be, how can we help?
Channel 8's parent company, BELO, has put together a Spirit of America Relief Fund, along with J.P. Morgan, Chase Bank, and the American Red Cross. Channel 8's Troy Dungan is going to fill us in on details of that. Troy?
Oh, yes, I'll be talking to you more about that as the evening goes on, but we always say family first and Spirit of Texas. This is more than that. This is the Spirit of America, and here's a way you can help with your money, and believe me, they're going to need money. This is the WFA-TV Spirit of America Relief Fund, as Scott said. You go to any Texas J.P. Morgan Chase Bank tomorrow. The money you donate will go directly to help the victims and families affected by these terrorist attacks in New York and Washington through the American Red Cross. Now, this is a 501c3 account. If you want to know, that means it's tax deductible. Somehow, I don't think that's going to be very important right now. You want to give money to these folks who are needing it. You go to any Chase Bank tomorrow and make your check payable to the American Red Cross, DR789. DR789. Now, that'll get your donation to the victims through the Red Cross just as quickly as possible. But if you can't get to a Chase Bank and you send donations to WFA-TV, the Dallas Morning News, or TXCN, still make the checks payable to the American Red Cross, DR789. We will be talking to you more about this during the evening and later on during the week, but that will get money where it's needed directly to these families and victims. Talk to you later this evening.
All right, Troy, thank you very much. Speaking of money, all of the U.S. financial markets closed down in the wake of today's attacks. Our business analyst, David Johnson, has been a busy man today on that part of the story. David, I know that they are closing the markets for tomorrow. The futures, the securities, all those are going to be closed. How are investors likely to react to this?
Well, I think we need calming words, and we're beginning to get them. The Federal Reserve put out, in essence, the same release that I saw them put out in October of 1987 when we had the market crash then. They said the Federal Reserve System is open and operating. The discount window is available to meet liquidity needs. They're saying that it's business as usual, that the system still works. Alan Greenspan, we found out, was in Switzerland for a conference. He tried to get back. His plane was diverted, and he is back in Switzerland. But he sends word that he is monitoring the situation. Treasury Secretary O'Neill, we finally found him in Japan, getting ready to meet with leaders there. He has canceled his agenda, sends word back that the U.S. financial markets are strong and resilient. He says they worked extremely well, and he says he backs this suggestion that the financial markets close tomorrow. In fact, Scott, it's going to be almost impossible to open these. It would be impossible to open these things tomorrow. The entire island of Manhattan, south of 14th Street, is impassable, and Mayor Giuliani has just announced it's been closed.
Right. David Johnson, thank you very much. The people in Washington have also said that the markets will reopen as it is, quote, appropriate and practical. David Johnson, our business analyst. Thank you very much, David. Of course, we invite you to stay with News 8 for the latest on today's terrorist attacks.
And, of course, ABC News will continue live coverage throughout the evening, and we, of course, will be keeping an eye on any local developments and bring them to you.
Also want to let you know about an extra being printed by the Dallas Morning News. You can pick up a copy of this free of charge at most grocery stores and convenience stores, and it is a quite interesting read. I'm sure the first of many reads that people will have.
Right. As Macy mentioned, many people likening this disaster to Pearl Harbor, certainly our Pearl Harbor of our generation, but 2,500 people lost their lives in Pearl Harbor, approximately, and we don't have any idea yet what the death toll will be today. It could surpass that. So, of course, Peter Jennings and his crew will be keeping an eye on that.
That's right. And the President speaks to the nation tonight at 8 o'clock. That's speaking of Peter Jennings. Let's go back to ABC Network now, and we'll have more local news for you coming up later.
Good evening.
You've been watching News 8's continuing coverage of America Under Attack. Stay with News 8 for all the latest developments.
Really just one of complete, almost wounded numbness, and there's no other phrase I can summon at this moment to convey it to you.
Thank you very much, Diane. Diane Sawyer, who's been in Midtown Manhattan all day trying to get a grasp of the city and very effectively what's going on around her. Don Daler from ABC News Good Morning America has been down with a couple of freelance photographers. It's freelance photographers who brought us the most intimate, the closest up video of what actually happened at the Twin Trade Towers today. It's a reminder of the world we live in. There's a camera pointed by somebody almost everywhere. Catch you up very quickly on a story to say again what we said before World News Tonight came on, which that U.S. officials speaking for some reasons on the conditions of anonymity say the United States is not involved in any of the violence going on in Kabul, the Afghanistan capital tonight. This appears to be an intra-Afghan affair, that the supporters of a leading anti-Taliban leader who was killed the other day have been rocketing the city tonight, so it has nothing, as best we can tell, to do with this. And then, of course, there was the Pentagon, and it just, think back 10 hours, it just began to pile up on us, one thing after the other. One was horrible, the next was third horrible. By the time the Pentagon attacked, shortly after the attack on the Twin Trade Towers, it was amazing. And here's ABC's John McCarthy, who's been there all day. John?
Peter, it was at 9:38 this morning. I was innocently sitting in my office at the Pentagon when there was a jolting blast on the other side of the building. You can see it over my shoulder. A large aircraft came down 395, which is a major highway. It clipped off the tops of many of the light poles on the way in, and it slammed into the building. You can see on the one side of the huge gash that windows, 25 windows down along the Pentagon were destroyed. The building, the section of the building that was hit by the fuselage of the aircraft collapsed several minutes after the aircraft hit it. I was able to get an exclusive walk up to the damaged site with some officials who got me through police lines. The area is surrounded with police evidence markings all over. There was a huge area for medical triage that is quiet now. And now they are continuing to fight fires inside the building, Peter, so they can go ahead and try and get anyone who may be still trapped in the rubble. It took them 5 hours before they were able to get into the building initially and begin to look for people who might be trapped and injured.
John, we heard a while ago, and there's some chaos here too, as you can understand, about a preliminary casualty figure at the Pentagon. Do you feel you have a good handle on that?
I do not have a good handle on it, Peter. There have been wild rumors from several hundred to over 1,000. It's impossible to know at this point, and I will not speculate.
And you may have said this most recently, and we would never want you to speculate, John. We believe, I believe you said now what you said earlier before, that the senior military officials at the Pentagon, none of them have been hurt to the best of your knowledge.
Don Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, is in just a few minutes going to hold a briefing inside the Pentagon for a very few number of reporters that are over there. And all of the military chiefs have been accounted for, and they have been spending the day in the National Military Command Center. Presumably, they have initially been looking at rescue options, but we also believe they are looking at retaliation options. But before that can happen, of course, the United States has to determine who they believe is responsible for this attack. I'll tell you, Peter, there is a pervasive sense of anger among the military officers I've talked to today. They have mentioned again and again Pearl Harbor, saying that it is going to be dwarfed. The number of people killed in Pearl Harbor so many years ago, just about 2,600. They say the casualties from this one are going to be so much worse. They are ready to go to war. There is a sense of war here at the Pentagon.
And thank you very much, John McWethy at the Pentagon. We'll be coming back to you many times in the course of the evening. The question is, go to war with whom? Because from the FBI, from the CIA, from the Pentagon today, no warning of this whatsoever, no knowledge of who's involved, no clues yet as to who's involved that we have heard about in any respect today. It has been interesting today to try to focus on the president, too, because the country does so clearly focus, I can't read that, I'm sorry, does focus on the president in a moment like this for leadership. And I believe that Ann Compton, who's been with the president all day, in a very tight group of people with the president, is on Air Force One and can talk to us at the moment. Annie, can you hear me?
Yes, Peter, I can. We're just getting off of Air Force One. He has arrived back in Washington with a dramatic flight with F-16s and F-15s on either wing as he came into Andrews Air Force Base. And the president feels it's important to address the nation tonight. Later this evening, he will give what we are told is a message of reassurance to Americans that the United States has been tested before and has always passed those tests. And when we saw him briefly toward the back of the plane, he was resolute.
Annie, thank you very much. And the president will take a helicopter, I gather, from Andrews Air Force Base downtown, or do we know that?
Well, we do know that, but it's one of the things we aren't going to talk about until he's safely at home.
Well, we just did, inadvertently, and as we had not been told not to talk about it, but there was some question. The president does traditionally come from Andrews Air Force Base down, and one assumes, given the extraordinary security that's surrounded the president today and how the Secret Service has moved him first from Florida and then out to Nebraska and now to Louisiana, first of all, then to Nebraska and back to Washington, president all over the country. Here's the Secretary of Defense, Don Rumsfeld, who's been in the Pentagon all day. And we're having difficulty hearing him, and one should not be surprised if there isn't some kind of, if there's some kind of hookup that didn't work today. Very, very rarely today have we had a problem. So we'll have our reporter on the scene listen to this, and the moment that we can hear him, we will go back to him. But in the meantime, Claire Shipman is just outside the White House across Lafayette Square. Claire, I want to check in quickly with you, if I may, to know that if we know anything about the president's plans for this evening, that we, in some respects, haven't had on the air today, or go beyond what Ann's reporting is.
Well, what we do know is that we're told by sources who've been with the president today that he is extremely upset, of course, about what has happened, but agitated and angry. Somebody told us that the language he will use tonight will be retaliatory. He will express his impatience. In other words, he will say there won't be a long time spent thinking about how to act once
Claire,
the U.S. is confident.
I apologize. I wouldn't interrupt you if
Sure.
we couldn't go back to Mr. Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense. Well, the best laid plans. First of all, here we are.
Kind enough to come down and has been with us. We've very recently had a discussion with the President of the United States. Chairman Hugh Shelton has just landed from Europe. Secretary of the Army, Tom White, who has a responsibility for incidents like this, as executive agent for the Department of Defense, is also joining me. It's an indication that the United States government is functioning in the face of this terrible act against our country. I should add that the briefing here is taking place in the Pentagon. The Pentagon's functioning. It'll be in business tomorrow. I know the interest in casualty figures, and all I can say is it's not possible to have solid casualty figures at this time. And the various components are doing roster checks, and we'll have information at some point in the future, and as quickly as it's possible to have it, it will certainly be made available to each of you. I'll be happy to take a few questions after asking First General Shelton if he would like to say anything, and then we will allow the others to make a remark or two.
General Shelby, outgoing
Secretary.
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the Secretary just said, today we have watched the tragedy of an outrageous act of barbaric terrorism carried out by fanatics against both civilians and military people. Acts that have killed and maimed many innocent and decent citizens of our country. I extend my condolences to the entire Department of Defense families, military and civilian, and to the families of all those throughout our nation who lost loved ones. I think this is indeed a reminder of the tragedy and the tragic dangers that we face day in and day out, both here at home as well as abroad. I would tell you up front, I have no intentions of discussing today what comes next, but make no mistake about it, your armed forces are ready.
Chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Carl Levin.
Our intense focus on recovery and helping the injured and the families of those who were killed is matched only by our determination to prevent more attacks and matched only by our unity to track down, root out, and relentlessly pursue terrorists, states that support them, and harbor them. They are the common enemy of the civilized world. Our institutions are strong, and our unity is palpable.
Senator John Warner.
Thank you. As a past chairman preceding Carl Levin, I can assure you that the Congress stands behind our president, and the president speaks with one voice for this entire nation. This is indeed the most tragic hour in America's history, and yet I think it can be its finest hour, as our president and those with him, most notably our Secretary of Defense, our chairman, and the men and women of the armed forces all over this world stand ready not only to defend this nation and our allies against further attack, but to take such actions as are directed in the future in retaliation for this terrorist act. A series of terrorist acts unprecedented in world history. We call upon the entire world to step up and help, because terrorism is a common enemy to all, and we're in this together. The United States has borne the brunt, but who can be next? Step forward and let us hold accountable and punish those that have perpetrated this attack. Again, I commend the Secretary, the Chairman, and how proud we are. We spoke with our President here moments ago. He's got a firm grip on this situation, and the Secretary and the General have a firm grip on our armed forces and in communication of the world over.
The Secretary of Defense, Carl Levin, Senator, Democratic Senator Carl. They're going to take questions. Let's stay here with this and see if anything is revealed.
Mr. Secretary, did you have any inkling at all, in any way, that something of this nature and something of this scope might be planned?
Charlie, we don't discuss intelligence matters.
I see. And how would you respond if you find out who did this?
Obviously, the President of the United States has spoken on that subject, and those are issues that he will address in good time.
Mr. Yes. Secretary, we are getting reports from CNN and others that there are bombs exploding in Kabul, Afghanistan. Are we at the moment striking back, and if so, is the target Osama bin Laden and his organization?
I've seen those reports. They, in no way is the United States government connected to those explosions.
What about Osama bin Laden? Do you suspect him as the prime suspect in this?
It's not the time for discussions like that.
Mr. Secretary, you said you could not be specific about casualties. Can you give us some characterization of whether it's dozens or hundreds in the building?
Well, we know there were large number, many dozens in the aircraft that flew at full power, steering directly into between, I think, the first and second floor of the opposite the helipad. You've seen it. There cannot be any survivors. It just would be beyond comprehension. There are a number of people that they've not identified by name, but identified as being dead, and there are a number of casualties. But the FBI has secured the site, and the information takes time to come. People have been lifted out and taken away in ambulances, and the numbers will be calculated, and it will not be a few.
Mr. Secretary,
could you tell us what you saw?
Mr. Secretary, do you consider what happened today, both in New York and here, an act of war?
There is no question but that the attack against the United States of America today was a vicious, well-coordinated, a massive attack against the United States of America. What words the lawyers will use to characterize it is for them.
Does that mean Secretary of Defense Don Rumsfeld being asked all the obvious questions, and let's just quickly review them before we move. Did they have any inkling of this in advance? The answer is they don't discuss this. Every single piece of evidence we have seen all day says the United States in no way had any inkling of what was going to happen, and if they did, boy, somebody missed something somewhere. Secretary, reaffirming what we reported to you already, the U.S. has no, or saying again what we've said already, that the U.S. has no involvement in Afghanistan, the violence occurring in Kabul tonight. This is not a time to discuss whether or not the United States suspects Osama bin Laden, but he's been at the top of the list of American suspects for international acts of international terrorism for so long now, it's impossible not to imagine he wouldn't be at the top. Casualties in the building, he says there are many. And then he goes on to make the point that we sometimes forget in covering New York and the Pentagon today, and that is the people who died on the aircraft. 266 people died on 3 aircraft today, 4 aircraft today. The 2 that crashed into the trade towers, the 1 that crashed into the Pentagon, and the 1 that crashed in Pennsylvania today, whether or not it was on a mission or not. Was this an act of war? Secretary of Defense and everybody else in the government today, you can expect to be very careful about using the phrase an act of war, because it imposes on the United States certain requirements to respond in certain ways if they find themselves involved in a war, especially with another country. We believe this is now the President coming from Andrews Air Force Base to the White House, but it was Senator John Warner, one of the most senior politicians involved with the military for many, many years now, and a man with a real sense of history and knowledge of history, surely, who describes this as the most tragic hour in America's history. I think there will be people, not least of whom are historians throughout the country, will argue with the senator about that today, given the attack on Pearl Harbor, given the invasion of Normandy, and heavens knows, given the first and most tragic days of the Civil War in 1861, who will argue with that characterization. But it does give you some real sense at the moment of how intense the feeling is, not only in the political establishment in the country as a whole as well, and all sorts of other countries. I'm getting messages from countries all day today, people deeply, profoundly shaken by the experience that the United States has had today. I want to go to Washington now because Claire Shipman is there right opposite the White House. We'll come back to Charlie Gibson and casualties in just a moment, but as we think, Claire, that the President may indeed be arriving, are those helicopters, Air Force or Marine One as it's called, the President's helicopter coming from Andrews Air Force Base?
Yes, that's right, Peter. And in fact, we're told the only reason that his security team felt comfortable letting him chopper back to the White House was because there is substantial air cover in the area keeping him protected. But it has been a long day for him, as you noted, and he has, we're told from people who were with him, wanted to get back to the White House all day, but again was listening very closely to his security team, who wanted to be absolutely certain that that was going to be all right. We were talking earlier, the President is very eager to make plain tonight that his mood is retaliatory, to express impatience. We got a little bit of a hint of that from a statement from Ari Fleischer, his press secretary today, who said not so long ago, "We will find these people and they will suffer the consequences of taking on this nation." I wouldn't be surprised to hear something like that from the president tonight. Equally eager to get back, Peter, just as the president is back, congressional leaders, they're planning to make a public statement tonight at 7:30 p.m. Again, everybody wanting to show this is business as usual in Washington, certainly not usual in the way we would ever define it, but they want to show a government that is up and functioning because they think that the PR element here, in terms of sending a message around the world, is every bit as important as security measures.
As we wait, I'm going to bring in the voice of Charlie Gibson at the moment because I do not want to go away from this scene on what I assume is the south lawn of the White House. We'll just stay with this and watch the president come out. But Charlie, you've been trying to get some kind of handle on casualties throughout the day. Have had any success?
Well, no, Peter. People want a number, and as if it were some way to quantify these most horrific of acts. And properly, no one has been willing to speculate on what that number may be. Obviously, any low number would have to be ratcheted up at some point, and to give upper-end estimates are probably too horrible to imagine. As the mayor of New York, Rudolph Giuliani, said, when we get the final number, it will be more than we can bear. The concern, obviously, is that there were emergency workers inside the World Trade Centers when they collapsed, when the Twin Towers came down, and the evacuations had not been completed. And as the Secretary of Defense said a moment ago, when we get the totals from the Pentagon, it will be a lot more than a few. We do have some estimates on injured, but again, these are highly unreliable. The mayor, again, saying at least 2,100 injured in New York, 1,500 taken to Liberty State Park across the Hudson River in New Jersey, 600 taken to hospitals, and the most chilling, one of the most chilling quotes that we've heard today, St. Vincent's Hospital here in New York had more than 200 injured. One doctor, Stephen Stern, saying there are hundreds of people burned head to toe. And we know many burn victims have been evacuated, some as far away as being taken to Canada, some being flown to Vanderbilt Hospital in Nashville. The military apparently flying those burn victims out.
Thanks, Charlie. There he is, the president, coming back from a trip that has taken him first to Florida today to talk about education, when ironically the political establishment in Washington wanted to talk about federal budget and keeping the country out of recession. And then this happened just as the president was visiting a group of people. He learned about it, spoke to the people, then moved on to Louisiana and then out to Nebraska, where he went into a bunker totally reminiscent of the situation which the president might have found himself in and which the country prepared for during the Cold War, when the issue was nuclear exchange between the United States and the Soviet Union. And now, after something of a sharp debate, we gather, between the president's political staff and between the Secret Service, the president is coming home to the White House. There's nothing that this president, this new and young president, could ever have imagined was going to occur on his watch, which would test his leadership qualities so. And he is going, and how he responds, how he accommodates the country's frustration, and how he accommodates the country's anxiety and anger, and how he responds or finds a way to respond, and as we've said many times, to whom will mark George Bush, however it goes, one way or the other. As he will speak to the nation at 9 o'clock tonight, and as Claire Shipman said to us, the representatives of the Congress, who've been pretty forthright today, earlier Senator Biden early today, saying that Congress must be seen to keep going, that the most important thing is that terrorists not be allowed to see that American life has been interrupted to any greater extent than it already has today. So we're going to hear in full later tonight, but we shall be on the air for the entire time for any development. Lisa Stark, who covers aviation for us on a full-time basis from Washington, is in Seattle today. Among other things, the headquarters of the Boeing company, which had its aircraft involved in these hijackings today, 757 and a 767. What can you tell us, Lisa?
Well, Peter, it now appears that the weapon of choice appears to have been knives on board these planes. We know from reports from our sources and others that reports from flight attendants on an American flight and from passengers on two different flights, we're now learning, the United flight that went into the World Trade Tower as well as the flight that went into the Pentagon. Cell phone calls from passengers on both those flights reported that men were on board with knives or box cutters, that flight attendants had been injured or killed, that people had stormed the cockpit. We also learned that on one of the flights, the American Airlines flight that went into the World Trade Tower, the flight attendant was also able to tell the American Airlines Operations Center, she reached them and told them what was going on board. She was able to tell them the actual seat number of the passenger who was causing the problems on the plane. So that may lead authorities at least to one name, at least the name of the person who booked that ticket. She was able to give that information to the people at American Airlines. Obviously, this was a major security breach at 3 U.S. airports. There will be a lot of talk, as there is already, about how this could possibly have happened. One person told me these are obviously shocking events, but not that surprising. There have been a number of reports throughout the years about security problems at U.S. airports. The Department of Transportation Inspector General, the GAO, all of those groups have done reports talking about how easy it is to penetrate secure areas, to get on airplanes, how easy it is to get devices past the people who are checking you at the screening machines. So obviously this will be a focus of the investigation to find out how these people got on board and how the weapons got on board as well. Peter?
Lisa Stark, who is in Seattle for us tonight, and gives us one additional piece of information I think we have not had earlier today, which was that one of the people on board the American Airlines flight that was, I think she said, Lisa, are you still there? Lisa Stark's still there. I think she said was the first flight, the first aircraft today, which run into the trade towers, that somebody on board did manage to give some security operators at American Airlines headquarters the number of a seat in which one of the...
From WFAA-TV, Channel 8, the Spirit of Texas, this is News 8's continuing coverage of America Under Attack.
Today is obviously one of the most difficult days in the history of the city and the country.
A big explosion happened. It looked like a bomb. The building swayed. And I look up and the tower just starts crumbling down. And everybody in the street just stops and started crying and bawling. And I'm standing next to a fireman. He said, yeah, they just bombed the Pentagon, too. It came in at such a deep angle and such fast speed.
The resolve of our great nation is being tested. But make no mistake, we will show the world that we will pass this test.
In every century comes only a handful of days about which the entire country shares a common memory. Pearl Harbor, the death of John F. Kennedy, the Shuttle Challenger accident.
Today's coordinated terrorist attacks on New York and Washington mark this as the first of those days for the 21st century. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Gloria Campos.
And I'm John McKay.
We're going to expand our 6 o'clock broadcast tonight to a full hour to bring you comprehensive coverage of today's attacks.
First, an update on the rapidly developing events. At this hour, Afghanistan is under attack. Missiles have targeted Kabul. U.S. officials believe Afghan opposition leaders are behind this air assault. Also, a little over an hour ago, a third building in the World Trade Center complex in New York collapsed. It had already been evacuated. Officials say it could take days to determine the total number of casualties in today's attack. We know that 100 people in the Pentagon were either hurt or killed. However, thousands of people were inside the World Trade Center. President Bush has arrived in Washington, where he will address the nation tonight at 8 o'clock our time. That's almost exactly 12 hours after U.S. freedom suddenly and violently was put to the test. It was just about 7:45 a.m. our time, the beginning of the business day in Manhattan. Inside the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, 50,000 people on the job, when the first plane, American Airlines Flight 11, was hijacked in flight from Boston to Los Angeles, redirected to New York, and slammed into the North Tower. New York fire and rescue crews responded immediately, arriving to find several of the upper floors of one tower ablaze, a gaping hole in one side of the building.
There's another one. I'm taking a look. Oh! Oh, my God! Oh, shit! Oh, my God!
But just minutes later, at 8:03 a.m., a second plane, a United flight from Boston to Los Angeles, flew directly into the second tower, with the whole world watching.
Now remember, oh my God.
Oh my God.
That looks like a second plane.
I did not see a plane go in. That just exploded.
We just saw another plane coming in from the side.
The FAA immediately shut down airports in the New York area. In Florida, President Bush, visiting a school, cut the visit short, calling the attacks a national tragedy.
A full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
Bridges and tunnels in New York were shut down to car traffic. All domestic flights ordered to land. But the attackers were not finished. 42 minutes after the crashes in New York, a third hijacked jetliner. American Flight 77 took off from Dulles Airport near Washington and crashed minutes later on the edge of the Pentagon.
It was a real severe intention is what it had to it. You could tell it was like a suicide bomber.
This is as close as we can get to the base of the World Trade Center. You can see the firemen assembled here, the police
Back in New York, one of the Trade Center towers, still on fire, collapsed on those hurt in the initial blast, and the hundreds of firefighters trying to rescue them. The Federal Aviation Administration shut down all aircraft takeoffs nationwide. Government buildings in Washington were evacuated. But among the planes still in the sky, a fourth jetliner, a United Airlines Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco. It crashed into a field near Pittsburgh.
There was, dust and whatnot everywhere, but it was...
The second building has just come down. The second tower has just fallen.
And finally, almost 2 hours after the attacks began, the second of the Trade Center towers finally dropped from the sky, a growing plume of smoke and dust engulfing a good portion of the borough of Manhattan, over which it once proudly stood. And now let's take a closer look at the jets involved in today's tragic events. American Flight 11 was en route from Boston to Los Angeles with 92 people on board. It crashed into the World Trade Center. United Flight 175 hit the other Trade Center tower. It was bound from Boston to Los Angeles, 65 people on board. The two other downed airliners were United Flight 93, flying from Newark to San Francisco with 45 people on board that plane. And that plane went down southeast of Pittsburgh. And American Flight 77, flying from Washington Dulles to Los Angeles with 64 people on board. It crashed into the west wall of the Pentagon.
Of course, we all know now that 2 of the 3 jets that crashed into buildings today were American Airlines jets.
Channel 8's Jim Douglas joins us now live from American's Fort Worth headquarters, where today's events have been devastating on several levels. Jim?
John, American Airlines is not answering any questions tonight about these incidents. Instead, it is referring all inquiries to the FBI. However, there was an informal mention this morning about a phone call that came into the American Airlines Operations Center not far from here this morning. Just a hint of the terror that lay ahead. We now know, according to ABC News, that the phone call came from a flight attendant on American Airlines Flight 11. She told the staff at American Airlines that 2 flight attendants on board had been stabbed and that the hijackers had taken control of the cockpit. Now, at this point, American Airlines has not confirmed that, and of course, there was no hint at that point that the hijackers planned to turn these giant civilian airliners into literally flying bombs. Now, the Boeing 757, like the one that hit the Pentagon, would have been loaded with about 11,000 gallons of fuel, about 400,000 pounds of takeoff weight, and then that Boeing 767, a much larger airplane that hit the World Trade Centers, that would have carried about 24,000 gallons of fuel as it was headed across country. Now, here at the American Airlines headquarters today, flags were lowered to half-staff, and then a little bit later, flowers appeared in the lobby from somewhere, along with some words of condolence. We have just learned tonight that American Airlines has been cleared to fly 2 plane loads of employees, one to one to New York and one to Washington. Now, those employees are members of the American Airlines care teams. They are volunteers who are trained to assist the families of the victims, and we're told that those teams have been cleared to fly up there. In fact, we heard one jet fly over just a short time ago. So the only aircraft, civilian aircraft, flying over America tonight may be the ones that are loaded with those American Airlines employees and some officials, we can assume, that are going to assist the families of the victims in New York and in the Washington area. I'm Jim Douglas, reporting live from American Airlines headquarters, and now John and Gloria, back to you.
All right, thanks a lot, Jim. For the first time in the nation's history, all commercial aircraft are grounded at least until noon tomorrow.
The impact of the FAA's order is huge, and with more on that, Channel 8's Brad Watson joins us live from DFW Airport. Brad?
John and Gloria, the effect here at DFW Airport is dramatic tonight. Take a look at this over my shoulder, because we haven't seen this since DFW opened in 1974, a near empty curb on what should be a busy weeknight. We also have the highest security level ever at the airport, and the airport is closed because of terrorism. The government order to ground all flights nationally affected passengers and airline workers immediately at DFW.
I was on my way to Reno, Nevada, and we were just about to board. And I was maybe the last 4 or 5 people, and they cut out for boarding.
Other passengers who thought they were cleared for flight came back.
We never had a chance to take off. It's just a real tragedy. We stayed on the runway and then the tarmac for about an hour and a half.
Some flights actually took off, but didn't get far.
Then we took off, and as soon as we got in the air, they told us to come back. So we were in the air probably 30 minutes. And then they put us out here, and they said there was just an emergency going on. Didn't know what was happening. So then they played the radio in the airplane for us, told us what was going on.
A terrorist attack. People are scared, people are shaking, some were crying in the streets.
Then the news spread outside and inside terminals. Accepting the reality of the unthinkable proved hard.
It just gave me chills, and I've been praying.
Security then tightened visibly. Dogs began sniffing through the terminals. Outside, police towed unattended vehicles. The airport closed the areas and gates beyond the security checkpoints.
Nothing is operating today. You have to go tomorrow.
Passengers scrambled to ticket counters to see when they might arrange another flight. No one knew. Now, the Secretary of Transportation has ordered all flights grounded until at least noon tomorrow. American Airlines has not said when it might consider flying again. Delta Airlines told the mayor of Dallas this afternoon that it will not fly any earlier than 5 p.m. tomorrow. Now, the passengers, thousands of them out here